Well, that is a very important question. This 2024 election, could have a huge impact. If, for example, Donald Trump was elected president, it's not clear, how much he would support Ukraine. Although I have to point out that even when he was president, the U.S. gave more assistance to Ukraine than the Obama administration did. So it's just not clear with Donald Trump what he's going to do. I really think that the way that this war will end will, whether some dramatic change in Russia occurs, leadership and a change of policy, or if there's a collapse of Western support for Ukraine. Those are, I think, the two things that each side is waiting to see happen.
So, is the war in Ukraine at a stalemate? There's no doubt that it's prolonged and with no end in sight. Fighting hasn't stopped everywhere, however progress is slow. As winter approaches, conditions are set to be even more challenging. There are also battles happening in countries thousands of miles away from the conflict, which could shape its future direction. They include some US lawmakers pushing back on military aid for Ukraine, smaller donor countries rethinking their contributions, and Russia reinforcing allies. Meanwhile, the view on the ground from Ukraine's top military official is clear. Technology, not tanks, will determine which side advances in this war. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by me, Charmaine Cozier, produced by Philip Revel, and researched by Matt Tolson. The editor is Tara McDermott, and technical producer Richard Hanniford.
That was the BBC's The Inquiry. I'm Jeff Goods here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Markusa. This is Information Radio, and we are live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on that CBC Listen app. Thanks for joining us. 3 minutes to 6 a.m. The morning show is on with you until 8:37 in the morning. And we always mention the traffic line early in the commute if you need us, 788-3093. Let's have a little look around the province this morning, see what's going on in terms of the weather. It is mainly clear in Winnipeg. It's -2. The sky put on a show last night. Abby Adeyemi, who is our technical producer, got some amazing images of this. So we'll chat about that. Good morning to you, Abby. In Winnipeg, currently, as I mentioned, -2. In Brandon, right now, it is clear. It's -7. In Dauphin, it's clear. It's -4. In Thompson, right now, it is cloudy. And it is, it's mainly clear in Thompson. And it's cold. It's -17 degrees in Thompson. Still that wind warning continuing for Churchill, York today, with those winds expected to gust as high as 90. Well, I've said good morning to Abby behind the controls. Good morning also to Pat Kanuga, who's here this morning, who is our show director and covers weather traffic. Good morning to Travis Peterson behind the controls of our CBC Manitoba CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, not just for our show, for the whole station. And Heather Wells is here too. Heather Wells is here with headlines ahead of World Report.
Good morning. Well, you won't be driving over the Arlington Bridge this morning. The city closed the bridge yesterday after an engineering report found corrosion is making it unsafe for vehicles. The long-term fate of the Arlington Bridge should be known in a couple of months. Another report due out in February is expected to say whether the bridge can be fixed up again. City leaders want to step on the gas in their bid to improve Winnipeg's transit system. The Public Works Committee has passed a proposal to set June 2025 as its rollout date for a new primary transit network. We're going to hear from the councillor in charge what she envisions for this new transit network in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, this morning on the program, we're going to hear more about the Arlington Bridge, more detail about what happened there, more on the history, and more on where we go from here. But the most important thing is, what do you think of this? 788-3205. So that's coming up. In addition, in the first hour of the show, earaches are common, particularly in kids. But in our medical column, Dr. Raj Bardwaj will talk about when you should go to the ER and when you can wait. Stay tuned.
On cue with Tom Power.
Things are going to change. I got us a new coach.
Taika Waititi's new film, Next Goal Wins, is about the American Samoan football team's quest to get just one goal. Taika will be here to tell you what he found inspiring about their real-life story and why he thinks film and TV need to change their definition of diversity. That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcy Young. We're learning more about the Israel-Hamas deal. The first Israeli hostages are expected to be freed tomorrow. In exchange, Israel will start releasing some Palestinian prisoners. There will be a pause in the fighting as part of this deal, and hundreds of aid trucks will be allowed into Gaza. The CBC's Briar Stewart is in Jerusalem with the latest.
From her home on the coast of Israel's Dead Sea, Camilo Telishai desperately waits to hear more about the hostage deal. Her 13-year-old granddaughter, Gail Turchansky, was kidnapped by militants from Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. Ishai is worried she won't be among the 30 children expected to be released.
And I want her. And this feeling, maybe it's not, will be. It's make me very sad.
The agreement calls for 50 hostages to be released over a 4-day period. For every 10 additional hostages released, there will be one more day with no fighting. In return, Israel will free 150 Palestinians who are imprisoned, possibly more if additional hostages are released. Today, the Israeli government published the names of those who may be freed. The majority are teens. Some are charged with throwing stones or being part of criminal organizations. Israeli citizens have a 24-hour period where they can appeal to the Supreme Court to protest their release. In Gaza, intense fighting continues, particularly in the north, while hundreds of thousands remain crammed in dismal conditions in the south. Hamas says the deal allows hundreds of more aid trucks into the area. Tom White is the director of the UN agency that works with Palestinian refugees in Gaza.
We'll use the opportunity to try and repair some of the infrastructure, particularly things like water lines that were impossible to do whilst the conflict was raging.
The deal, while brokered by international officials, including from the US and Qatar, is still fragile. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
The pressure has been on U.S. President Joe Biden to help Americans who are still being held hostage. He now says he expects some of them to be released as part of this deal. CBC's Richard Madden joins us now from Washington. Richard, what are we hearing from officials in the U.S.?
Well, we heard from President Joe Biden in a statement overnight where he credited in part the leaders of Qatar and Egypt who helped put this deal together in what he called tireless diplomacy and relentless effort. And all this comes after weeks of complicated secret talks in Qatar where the U.S. and Egypt acted as a broker between the two sides. With President Biden reportedly intervening several times, Reuters is reporting he held an undisclosed call with the Emir of Qatar as proposals about a potential hostage deal was coming together. Now, one of the sticking points was reportedly Hamas. They didn't want to identify who it was holding. But Biden demanded to know the names, including the ages, gender, and nationalities, and that's when Hamas apparently agreed. So Biden spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and urged him to take the deal. Now, privately, top U.S. officials reportedly cautioned this deal because it could still all fall apart, insisting nothing is really final until the hostages are brought home and the guns go silent.
What are we hearing from the families of those who are still being held hostage?
Yeah, obviously there's a huge sigh of relief and optimism. One person is Galia Mizrahi. She's a 49-year-old mother who lives in Los Angeles. Her 17-year-old daughter and two young sons, aged 12 and 9, were among those taken hostage and are on the list of those to be released. It's just unclear when. Take a listen.
It's been so long. We've been stuck on October 7th for 45 days. Looping this in our minds over and over again, and just to have a sliver of hope and just a break already, just a break.
Now, the first phase of this deal is obviously 50 hostages, mostly women and children, and depending on how successful this goes, there could be more hostages freed eventually.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is attending a virtual G20 meeting today. It begins this hour and is hosted by India. This will be the first meeting between Trudeau and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi since early September. Ottawa had accused the Indian government of playing a role in the murder of the BC Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Freelance reporter Ishan Garg has more from New Delhi.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's participation in the G20 virtual summit comes as India resumes its e-visa services for Canadians. In September, the country suspended the visa services to Canadians citing, quote, operational reasons, but it came in the wake of heightened tensions between the two nations. Just a day ago, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said it's because Canada is harbouring extremists.
From our point of view, the key issue is really the space which has been given to extremism and radicalism in Canada.
India has raised concerns about what it calls rising Sikh radicalism in Canada. Canada has refuted such allegations. It has also pulled out 41 diplomats from India in a sign of worsening relations. Trudeau has said Canada will always stand up for the rule of law, but that he also wants to work constructively with India. The G20 meeting will focus mainly on sustainable development and enhancing cooperation between member nations. It comes as India readies to pass the baton to Brazil at the end of its presidency later this month. Ishan Garg for CBC News, New Delhi.
The work continues today to rescue the 41 men trapped in a collapsed tunnel in northern India. An auger drills a tunnel nearby. The hope is that it can be used as an escape route. The workers have been trapped for 10 days now in Uttarakhand province. This man is with India's National Disaster Response Force. He says they have already drilled about 37 meters down. That is about halfway to where the men are trapped. Yesterday, a camera was sent down a pipeline. It showed the men were in good spirits. The cause of the collapse still not clear, but the area in the India Himalayas is prone to landslides and earthquakes. The United Nations General Assembly has voted in favor of an Olympic truce resolution ahead of the 2024 Games in Paris. The vote is a tradition before each Olympics. It calls for a pause in fighting during Olympics and Paralympics Games. Thomas Bach is president of the International Olympic Committee.
I cannot remember a time when the world was facing so much confrontation, division, and polarization. The scourge of war and violence is growing.
Russia and Syria abstained from voting. There's news from the tech industry this morning. Sam Altman will return to OpenAI as CEO. He was fired just last Friday. A new board will accompany Altman back to the company. OpenAI is the maker of ChatGPT, a popular artificial intelligence tool. The staffing shakeup at the company brought attention to the conflicts around how to safely build AI. Retirement is more expensive than some seniors had planned, and the high price for food, gas, and home heating are putting pressure on their bank accounts. That reality is stark in Newfoundland and Labrador, as Chris O'Neill Yates tells us. The province has the largest number of aging people in the country.
Forever and ever, my heart will be true.
The cost of living doesn't have 77-year-old Doreen Noseworthy singing for joy. A teacher for 37 years, and her husband, an accountant, retired in 2002.
Our pension dollar is still worth what the dollar was worth 20 years ago. People don't realize that because you're retired from teaching or you're a fat cat.
But the buying power of their pensions has shrunk. The nearest supermarket is 50 kilometers away in St. John's. Gas is expensive and food prices soaring.
It's almost tripled the cost of the heating fuel.
How did I get here? Keeps being the question that, we hear.
A recent report from the seniors advocate, Susan Walsh, found that 1 in 3 seniors in this province can't afford basic needs, housing, food, and heating.
They're proud people. They worked their entire lives. They raised their families. They did all the right things.
Maintenance costs have become unaffordable. A new roof will cost Noseworthy $15,000, so their plan is to sell their home and move to a senior's apartment.
It's more than a house, but it is what it is.
Even though their golden years have been tarnished, Noseworthy intends to leave on a positive note. Chris O'Neill Yates, CBC News, Holyrood, Newfoundland.
Forever, my sweetheart.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, hello, Manitoba, and good morning, Winnipeg. See, I switched it around there on you. I'm Marcy Markusa. Welcome to the show. You're with Information Radio on CBC 89.3 FM, live from downtown Winnipeg. Thanks for being with us. 6:10 a.m. is the time. Pat in with the forecast in a moment. This hour on the show, Arlington Bridge closed. Why? Sounds like a silly question. Only because that bridge is so old, and for years we've been trying to replace it, come up with many plans, and fiscally we've been patching it. The problem is, now it needs a big fix. It's closed. We will see what happens next. We will start the show, though, with a hearing from the City of Winnipeg's Manager of Engineering about the Arlington Bridge. Later in the show, we're going to hear from city councillors about the issue of this critical north-south connection and its future. And we're asking you on Facebook how it impacts you, so weigh in there. In addition, on our medical column, earaches, they're common. But when should you take the kids to the ER? Dr. Bardwaj is going to walk us through it. That's just before 7 a.m. Right now, it is 6:11 a.m. and Heather Wells is here with other stories and headlines.
Good morning. Well, Manitobans will soon be able to access free birth control with a prescription. Health Minister Uzoma Eseguera says the NDP government is prioritizing women's health care. Eseguera says it's important to remove barriers for those who need it. And the head of the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada applauds a move by Manitoba's NDP government to make education about the Holocaust mandatory. Bel Jaraneski says people have been lobbying the government for almost 50 years. Meanwhile, the Manitoba Islamic Association also recently met with the new education minister. The group's finalizing a new toolkit the government plans to make available to help teachers deal with Islamophobia in schools. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
So Heather Wells,
yes,
as you know, we are about to start streaming live on our YouTube channel on a regular basis, and we are in fact right now already, as we're leading up to maybe more of a formal launch date. But I'm telling you this morning because Rodney says hello to me and to you, Heather.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Hi, Rodney.
Hi, Rodney. How you doing? Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Sorry, Pat. No mention
thanks,
of you.
Rodney. Thanks. Morning, Rodney.
No mention of Pat.
Poor Pat.
That's fine.
It's okay. He's on his way out anyway.
Yeah, I'm on my way out anyway.
More
next month.
We haven't made that announcement yet. That's later. One thing at a time. All right. Pat is here to talk about the weather and traffic. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's come back to traffic in a second. We'll just start with the weather because we're getting cold for a few days here. That wind yesterday afternoon, even though it was zero, I found it a little bit biting. But we had lots of sunshine. We're going to see lots of sunshine today as well. Here in Winnipeg, 0, mix of sun and cloud. -9 tomorrow, the coldest day for a few days. So -9 is the daytime high tomorrow. Tonight, though, we'll dip down to -13. Got to get used to these colder temperatures overnight. Thursday into Friday, -15. But then we're going to see, again, lots of sunshine, so clear and cold. Friday, a -5. Saturday, -2, Sunday, -4, and then we have another -9 way off. So the good news in all this is, yes, we're getting more seasonal, but no deep freeze, which we can have at this time of year at the end of November, and no daytime minus double digits either. We're all in the minus single digits. I looked at the 14-day forecast from our friends at the Weather Network, and it shows no minus double digits for daytime highs for the next 2 weeks. So we'll just hang on to that as we get into December. And let's see here. I will mention that the temperature is -2 in the city of Winnipeg right now on the way to that 0. Brandon, you're -7 with a mix of sun and cloud today, high of -1. And Thompson, you're a chilly -17 right now. You're only going to warm up to a -14 for a daytime high, but lots of sunshine. We're mostly clear in southern Manitoba right now and some cloud cover central and northern Manitoba. I'll have more in your regional forecast at 6:35. I should mention just briefly the wind warning again continues for a second straight day for Churchill-York regions. Could see wind gusts to 90 just like yesterday, and that's from this powerful winter storm moving through Nunavut, and it's bringing these strong winds to Churchill, so take it easy up there. In traffic, we'll hear more about the Arlington Bridge right away. I'll just mention that, remember, McPhillips, Salter, Main are kind of your 3 major arteries to avoid the Arlington Bridge if that is on your commute every morning. And it will be closed, as we'll hear, for a long, long time. Do give me a call if you see something. 788-3093 is our traffic and commuting line.
Well, as Pat mentioned, let's start talking about the Arlington Bridge. And for me, this is a story that is very, very critical to Winnipeg. Why? Because yes, we're talking about a transportation route, but we're talking about one that is critical to connect the north and south parts of the city. We're also talking about an area of the city where many a politician has run campaigns on talking about moving the rail yards that are beneath the Arlington Bridge to further enhance that connection, strengthen the connection between north and south Winnipeg. But the bridge right now goes right over those rail yards. So it's central to the city, it's critical to the city, but it is in serious disrepair. We are in the first morning of the Arlington Bridge not being part of your daily commute. It has been closed for repair before, many times, even for weeks on end. But now this is a no-go zone for a long time and perhaps permanently, as they will assess in February. The city announced the closure yesterday after a recent bridge condition assessment. It means that all traffic and pedestrians have to take a detour across the rail yards, as I mentioned beneath, or around the rail yards, rather, that run beneath the bridge. There have been calls for the 121-year-old bridge to be replaced, and those calls date back to 2011. Brad Neerink is the manager of engineering with the City of Winnipeg's Public Works Department. Now, as we walk through this morning, what you're thinking about it, we're hoping you'll call us about it. We wanted to first start the show with revisiting what actually went wrong here. So he spoke with Corey Funk on Up to Speed yesterday.
We've been studying the bridge for quite some time. The bridge has been near the end of its service life since the mid 2015-16, something like that. So we've been doing a couple of studies on it. We did a bridge crossing study to determine whether it was required, which it is. And we did a preliminary design study for a new bridge, which was completed in 2019. And that had a $320 million price tag, so it was placed on the city's unfunded list at that time. So this year we put out another study to determine whether it's feasible to fix the existing bridge in the short term. And so the first part of that was this bridge condition assessment that we undertook. And so that's been going on during the summer. And this fall, we also did some maintenance on the bridge. We had the bridge closed for about 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. And we definitely noticed that there was an acceleration in the deterioration we're seeing. The detailed inspection identified accelerated deterioration as well. And we've also done some structural analysis to support that. So now everything is adding up. Now is the time to close the bridge until we can determine whether the bridge could be rehabilitated and then reopened at some point in the future.
And is there any timeline, like even a rough estimate of like when it could possibly, like, or even, of how long this might be closed for or when it might be open?
Yeah, so our next portion of the study would be completed by about February. So that would be to determine whether it's even feasible to repair it or not. But even if it's feasible to repair it, there would have to be a design process and a construction process. And the construction process would probably be a minimum of 2 years. So you're probably looking at least 3 years of closure from now.
Oh, wow. Okay. This bridge right now is part of a major route in and out of the north end. Where are you kind of encouraging drivers to go in the meantime?
Well, at this point, they'll have to disperse into other routes. We're not identifying a specific route. We do close this bridge annually for about a month every year for maintenance. That's been happening ongoing for several years now, and obviously McPhillips and Salter and Main Street are the options, as well as Q8. But people will have to judge the routes and take additional time and judge accordingly. We've never really closed the bridge in winter before, so we expect there would probably be significant delays in the winter as well.
In your engineering opinion, I mean, there's lots more that goes into it than simply you kind of just judging. But do you think it needs to be replaced, or do you think it can be rehabilitated?
It's too soon to tell. We need to we need to complete the study that we're doing right now to determine whether it is feasible to replace it. There's a lot that goes into that, including temporary works that has to occur while the bridge is being rehabilitated. Can you rehabilitate it over a working rail yard? All of that has to be taken into account.
Okay. And is there a chance it could be open to just pedestrians or cyclists at all, or will it be pretty much indefinite everything?
At this point, we're saying no. We need to keep it closed completely, and then we'll, we could reassess that after we have to undertake some maintenance right now to make sure that the bridge integrity is maintained, so that there's safe railway operations underneath. So we're going to be doing that. We can reassess that at another point, but at this point we're saying no, it's indefinitely closed for both pedestrians and vehicles.
Okay. And what does the city plan to do, if it's determined that the bridge does need to be decommissioned? Have you thought that far?
Yet, we would have to look at a decommissioning plan, which would be fairly difficult. We did look at one as part of the decommissioning this bridge as part of a new bridge to the west in 2019, and there's significant work to go into that in order to pick up those spans, put them down, and demolish them. So we did look at that in 2019. It's significant.
So the bridge is closed. Brad Nairink is manager of engineering for the City of Winnipeg's Public Works Department, talking about the Arlington Bridge closure there with CBC's Corey Funk, who's been guest hosting on Up to Speed. I just want to mention something because an idea came up in that interview. Corey was asking the guest about Brad Nairink about the idea of could it remain open to pedestrians and cyclists? And while that's not possible right now. In the past, that's been one of the calls for this bridge, so one of the ideas. People point to the pedestrian bridge behind the bridge drive and ice cream shop on Jubilee, of course, that sees tons of foot traffic during the spring and summer months. And so some people were calling that maybe Arlington, that could be the future of Arlington in some way. Of course, you still have to get around in this city. So we're asking right now, this morning, on our Facebook page, and for you to call the listener line, how will the closure of the Arlington Bridge impact you? 788-3205.
What happened that made you start to think and see climate change differently?
It's wind and heat, fossil fuels, fire, floods. It's international and very Canadian.
Hi. How much snow have you got there?
Quite a bit. Laura Lynch guides you through the climate change crisis, the problems, and the solutions. What on Earth? Sunday morning at 11:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
It is 6:22 a.m. on Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. I'm Marcy Markusa with our team here at the show. It is clear. It's -2 and calm in downtown Winnipeg, and we'll head to a high of 0 today with a mix of sun and cloud. Well, Swan Lake is one of the most well-known classical ballets of all time. It's almost 150 years since it debuted in 1877, and it continues to be performed all around the world. There's a new CBC documentary series that pulls back the curtain on the National Ballet of Canada's 2022 production. It follows Karen Kane as she wraps up her decades-long career with the company by stepping into a new role, director. The series also introduces us to the audience, to the dancers, and it takes viewers from rehearsal rooms into the chaos of backstage on opening night.
Karen Kane is one of the biggest international ballet stars ever.
I am directing for the first time. Left side, left arm. I have to feel so brave to do this.
Everyone wants to honor the tradition, but racism isn't a good tradition.
Ballet, it's like my angel, but it's also like my demon.
That's a clip from the new 4-part documentary series called Swan Song. It airs tonight on CBC television. It's streaming on CBC Gem, and Sean O'Neill is co-creator and producer of the series. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how are you feeling? Whenever I talk to a co-creator of anything on when it's about to be released to the world, how are you feeling about it?
I'm pretty excited. We had an amazing premiere at TIFF earlier this fall, and people responded really well. So yeah, I can't wait for people across the country to be able to tune in.
What was it about the story that made you want to tell it in this series?
I mean, it was kind of a perfect storm for us because you have, Swan Lake, which is like the most iconic ballet, and then you have Karen Kane, who's this iconic, Canadian I mean, they call her the Princess Diana of Canada in the documentary, one of the subjects. And she's retiring after 50 years. She's directing for the first time, coming back from the pandemic. It's the biggest production in their history. And then there are all of these young dancers, who are giving so much of themselves to this art form. And so it just felt like possibilities were endless when we landed on the idea.
People might be wondering, if I'm not a fan of ballet, if someone's not a fan of ballet, will this be accessible to them when they're watching it?
Well, I can tell you, my brother's a car salesman and has never seen a ballet. And he watched the series and said, oh my God, it's great. And I don't care about ballet at all, but I care about these characters. It's kind of like Cheer on the cheerleading show on Netflix, or Formula One. It's a show that takes you into a world that you would not ever get to see behind the scenes of otherwise. And, they're doing absolutely extraordinary things. They're like Olympic level athletes who are also artists. And so I think it's just fascinating from a human point of view.
Well, there's huge appreciation, of course, in Winnipeg because of our Royal Winnipeg Ballet.
Of course.
For people that might not really sort of understand how to frame Swan Lake, or maybe not familiar with Swan Lake, what's the importance of having Swan Lake from the view of a classical ballet company, to have that in your repertoire?
I mean, it's critical. It's kind of like life or death survival for a major company like the National Ballet of Canada. George Balanchine, who's a famous American choreographer, once said, every ballet should be called Swan Lake, and they would all sell out. So it's both an important signal that your company is of a scale and import enough to have a version of Swan Lake in your repertoire, but it's also like absolutely critical to the financial survival of these companies because it just sells well every time.
Pulling back the curtain on the process of getting any production to the stage isn't always pretty. Ballet itself has struggled with a lack of diversity and racial equity that we've reported on. Mm-hmm. How are those issues in ballet reflected in the series?
I mean, our rule was everything through the eyes of our characters. We wanted to tell the stories in an intimate way and in a personal way. And so, you have the story of Sipe November, a principal dancer at the National Ballet of Canada, who is the first Black dancer to play Prince Siegfried, the lead role on the male side in the ballet, and what that means for him and what that means for the company. And it's not as straightforward as you might think. It's complicated for him, and it reveals a kind of very difficult history within the company of dancers who are actually, dancers of color who were banned from playing the role as recently as the 80s and 90s. And then you have another storyline in which Karen Kane decided to forego tights, on the Swans. And I know this sounds really simple to us. We thought, okay, tights, no tights, who cares? But actually, this is the first, Karen Swan Lake was the first classical ballet and in a major company in which tights were not worn, and it meant that the dancers who are not white could finally feel what it was like to have one long line from the fingertip to the toe, which is ultimately the core expression of like what ballet should look like on stage. And so previously they were like cut off at the waist.
So their legs were bare for this?
Their legs were bare.
Wow. What did they say about that? What that meant to have that?
I mean, for the dancers of color, there's a young dancer named Tanae Ward who gets really emotional in the series and said, this doesn't solve racism in ballet, but it is a huge and meaningful step forward. And it's something that when all of the dialogue was coming up in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, and there was a lot of discussion in the ballet world about its history of racism, tights was a big thing that came forward among the dancers. And so I think, it was not without its controversy and reverberations within the company. There were definitely people who pushed back, and that was really interesting to watch, and it's in the series.
That's super interesting.
Karen came down on the side of, bare legs.
What was it? With any documentary, it sings on its truth. So what was it like trying to encourage the dancers and to be respectful of them, but to also encourage them to just let you in?
It was years. We shot 500 hours of footage for this show, and we started shooting in 2020 in the middle of the first lockdown and finished 2.5 years later. So we had time to really develop trust and develop real and sincere relationships. And in doc, it's like it's a vulnerability exchange. You have to be real. You can't be trying to exploit people. They can feel it. And I think that trust that develops is part of why the series is so intimate and why the characters did open up so much. And, we feel a great responsibility with their stories.
A shared purpose as well.
Yeah.
Understanding of why you're sharing. Thank you very much, Sean, and good luck as it rolls out on this bigger scale. Appreciate having you on today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Sean O'Neill is co-creator and producer of the documentary series Swan Song. All 4 episodes are available now to stream on CBC Gem, or you can catch the first episode tonight if you want to roll it out that way at 8 o'clock on CBC Television. By the way, in Winnipeg, the RWB website now has all the dates for their upcoming shows throughout their season, but the Nutcracker in Winnipeg, a lot of people look forward to it, of course. Their run is December 21st to 30th at the Centennial Concert Hall. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -2. A high again today of 0, but a cold wind is going to blow into town. The wind switching directions around noon today, and it's going to be colder starting tomorrow. We are learning new details this morning about a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. The deal was announced last night after weeks of negotiation. The Israeli cabinet approved that plan, which would involve the release of 50 Israeli hostages being held in Gaza in exchange for 150 Palestinian women and children being held in Israeli jails. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus speaks for the Israeli military.
Until we will be told to do so by the Israeli government, we will continue fighting Hamas. And when such a deal will come into effect, we will respect that.
The agreement calls for a pause in fighting for 4 days, but Israel says it could be extended longer if Hamas releases more hostages. Hamas says the deal will also allow hundreds of aid trucks to enter Gaza with medical supplies and fuel. We are starting to get reaction this morning from the families of Israeli hostages. Maya Roman is waiting to hear if her cousin Yarneen will be released by Hamas.
I still think that there's a long way to go, and we have to understand that this is just the beginning. But it does give us some much needed hope. And I hope that as we see people coming back, though it's going to be extremely painful if Yarden is not there.
Global Affairs Canada has said one Canadian is missing in the region, but it will not confirm if it believes that person is being held hostage by Hamas. You can hear the latest on the Middle East as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Well, advocates praise the new NDP government for its decision to make education about the Holocaust mandatory in public schools. Belle Jarneski at the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada says people have been lobbying the government for decades. She met with the new education minister 10 days ago to explain why teaching about the Holocaust is so important.
When students learn about the Holocaust, they engage with very complicated moral questions, some that do not come with simple answers, and critical thinking is also a big part of this.
Jarniski recommends the province make Holocaust education part of the grade 11 Canadian history curriculum. Now, the province will also make more resources available to teachers to deal with Islamophobia in schools. The Manitoba Islamic Association is putting the final touches on a new toolkit for teachers. Tasneem Vali is with the group.
This is a very important toolkit to educate educators so that when they are addressing children in their classroom or in a different setting, to know where they're coming from, to understand that there might be a background to something a child is saying and to understand context.
Valley says it's critical to provide extra supports now as many Winnipeggers are directly affected by the conflict in Gaza. If you normally take the Arlington Bridge on your morning commute, you may have to get used to another route. The Arlington Bridge was closed yesterday after an engineering study found too much corrosion in the 112-year-old structure. Its closure is reviving calls from North End City councillors for a fair share of major infrastructure projects. The city had a plan to replace Arlington Bridge 5 years ago, but that project came with a price tag of $330 million. Menarski councillor Ross Eady doesn't think the Arlington Bridge is a priority for Mayor Scott Gillingham.
The mayor chooses and wants to ignore it because he wants his widening of Kenniston, right? So this is always the competing interest.
Vivian Santos, the city councillor for Point Douglas, hopes the other two levels of government now will agree to pay for a new bridge. Manitobans will soon be able to access free birth control with a prescription. Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the NDP government is prioritizing women's health care. Asseguera says it's important to remove barriers to those who need it. Nurse practitioner Caitlin Bloxham says cost is prohibitive for some, and clinics offering it for free are not easily accessible for everyone.
It's really absolutely impossible at times for people to access birth control. And these are medications that we know to be safe. It would just be removing that barrier of cost.
British Columbia is the first province to offer free birth control in Canada 8 months ago. City leaders want to step on the gas in their bid to improve Winnipeg's transit system. The Public Works Committee has passed a proposal to set June 2025 as the rollout date for a new primary transit network. It would lay the groundwork for more frequent bus routes closer to areas where most Winnipeggers live. The original target was 2026. Councillor Janice Lukes chairs the Public Works Committee.
That's what we're hearing from the public is they want high-frequency transit. They want it fast. So we're accelerating the planning and development of all these new routes.
The city's transit union says one of the biggest roadblocks to the plan is recruitment and retention of drivers. Within 5 years, 44% of transit operators will be eligible for retirement. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
We got a great call actually yesterday. We had on the show someone who gave up their car for a while and was, trying to go without a car. And then they went back to the car. So we explored why and what was working and not for that family. But we got a great call and response for someone that said, and the guest acknowledged, they had a choice. Not everyone has a choice, of course. So they said, this was someone that called the listener line. We're going to hear it in the next hour. They said, I have no choice, been taking transit for many years, visually impaired, and let me tell you what I think we don't have in Winnipeg, what we need. So that's going to come up in the next hour. Right now, let's get into what's going on in the weather in the regional forecast from CBC Manitoba. Pat Kanuga.
Good morning, everyone. Let's start in Churchill. Good morning, Churchill. You have this wind warning, and I just looked to see on Environment Canada's website what the wind is doing in Churchill right now. Gusting from the northwest 56 to 79 kilometers per hour. It's minus 14. It's going to give you a heck of a wind chill as well, but the temperature is going to stay at minus 14 in Churchill today. But we could see gusts up to 90 as well throughout the day. So that is that wind warning because of the storm that is moving through Nunavut. And we have had some snow as well in the Churchill area, so it's been blowing snow as well. Still in the north, Thompson is minus 17. Sunshine today and a high of minus 14. Tonight, minus 20. Tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud and a high of minus 10. So a little bit warmer tomorrow. In Brandon, minus 7 right now, mix of sun and cloud. Wind gust to 50 this morning from the north and a high of minus 1. It's going to give us a wind chill this morning about minus 13 if you're out and about in Brandon, and minus 8 this afternoon. Tonight dipping down to a minus 19. Almost plug in the vehicle weather in my mind, minus 19. Tomorrow, sunshine and minus 9. In Winnipeg, we are minus 2 right now. We're going to get to a 0 in the sunshine. A lot of sun in the forecast. Clear and cold the next few days. So today with that 0, we'll have some wind gusting to 40 as well from the south. And it'll be gusting to about 50 near noon. High of 0 as mentioned. Tonight, minus 13. Tomorrow, a minus 9. The coldest daytime high of the next few days. Sunshine, though. And then on Friday, a minus 5. Saturday, Sunday, minus 2, minus 4. So pretty decent. Average temperature for this time of year is a minus 4 for a daytime high and a minus 13 overnight. So we're pretty close to that. Temps for you at this hour, besides Churchill at minus 14. Gimli, Interlake, minus 3. You'll see a 0 today. 0 in Morden, Winkler, Pembina Valley. That's where you are, and that's where you'll stay right now. Melitta's minus 2. Pretty much stay around there at a minus 1. Whiteshell, minus 5 on the way to a minus 1. Dauphin, Parkland area, you're minus 4. That is where you will stay. Once again, we're minus 2 in the downtown. Traffic. Give me a call, 788-3093 if you see any delays, lights out, anything like that. You're going to hear about the Arlington Bridge all morning in news and some of the interviews we're doing.
And we're already hearing from listeners this morning. Tell me when you're ready for comments.
You want to go with one right now? Sure.
Sure, yeah. People are writing to us on Facebook. So Lucas Maitland said, I use Arlington as part of my daily commute to get around the city. We need a crossing for pedestrian and bikes at least. I can drive to Salter and McPhillips, but pedestrians and cyclists need to be able to get across. I hope they open something. Marianne Clark, just another one quick here. I appreciate the concern for safety, but McPhillips is a nightmare already in rush hour. Salter slows to a snail's pace at Isabel. What's going to happen during road construction season when both the roads are forever partially blocked? And you don't have the bridge.
And on those
worries.
When we have those snowy days, traffic
worries.
is going to be very, very backed up. So you can give us a call, 788-3205, if you want to weigh in on the listener line, or you can check out Markusa's Facebook page as well to weigh in. But do give us a call if you see anything else out there, 788-3093. Reminders of McPhillips, Salter, and Maine are your detours for Arlington this morning.
All right, thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
Always like to remind people that my Facebook page during the show acts as a show page. Well, next on Information Radio, Crystalie Ramlakan is here with our business report. Good morning, Crystalie.
Good morning, Marcy.
So major grocery chains are starting to reveal right now their plans to stabilize food prices after promising to do something about 2 months ago. What can you tell us?
Yeah, and so they have been feeling pressure from the federal government to do more to combat inflation. So Canada's second largest grocer, Empire, says it's going to freeze prices on thousands of products until early next year. So Empire owns Sobeys, Farm Boy, Safeway, Freshco, Foodland, and IGA. But major retailers usually freeze prices at this time of year. So they don't usually accept price increases from suppliers to try to simplify operations around the holidays. So historically, Empire freezes prices on 90% of packaged goods between November and January already. But the company says it is expanding its practice this year to include all packaged products in its stores, which will include about 20,000 items. So it says it's canceling 1,700 price increases that were scheduled to go into effect between now and January. Walmart says it has started its holiday rollbacks discount program earlier than ever. It said it started on October 19th. And last week, Loblaw said it's going to offer cuts on 25 products through promotions in flyers, price matching, and exclusive discounts for loyalty members. Now, some of those items include staples like eggs, milk, butter, produce, pasta, and meat. But some experts say this is just a clever rebrand of the industry's annual holiday price freeze. So for more on this, we spoke to Tyler McCann, who is the managing director of the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. He says the moves by retailers have more to do with global inflationary forces easing than any pressure from the government.
A lot of the pressures that were driving food price inflation high were temporary pressures. We knew that the disruption of COVID was going to work itself out. We knew that the supply chain bottlenecks were going to work themselves out. We knew that our global markets would work themselves out once we got past that volatility coming out of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
And Marcy, experts also say that the underlying issue here is that there is a lack of competition since 5 chains control about 80% of the market here in Canada.
Let's go to your next story. It's about how people want to be more careful when it comes to what they buy this holiday season.
Yes, and that's because returning gifts may be harder this year. So many online retailers are now charging customers to return some products, and companies are rolling back their loose return policies that helped propel online shopping. So almost half of retailers now charge customers a fee to ship something back, and that's up from a third in 2021. Now, stores that charge customers in some areas to send back items include American Eagle, J.Crew, Saks Fifth Avenue, H&M, and Zara. And so processing returns cost companies about $165 million for every $1 billion of merchandise they sell. So, of course, we also know that returns jumped during the pandemic. People were at home ordering stuff with the intent of returning some things eventually. And even Amazon, which led the free returns movement, is charging for some returns now. So the e-commerce giant brought in about $514 billion in revenue last year and paid about $84 billion to process returns. And Forbes is also estimating that bad return experiences could jeopardize about 20% of online sales this season.
I guess we'll have to see then if that is a factor in people shopping local or returning to shop local if they don't want to pay the return prices online. So could have that impact. And the company, before we talked about markets this morning, Crystal, I understand the company that makes the clay for some of the well-known stop motion films is actually closing.
Yes, but the British animation studio behind Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep says it still has enough to keep animating. So New Clay Products was the only company that produced the clay that was used in these productions. But Aardman Animation says it has enough modeling clay to service current and future productions. And the clay is unique because it's malleable enough to mold, but firm enough to maintain its shape under the heat of studio lights. And the studio says it's purchased almost 900 pounds of the remaining supplies.
What is going on in the markets then?
In Europe, stocks are higher. Germany is up. The UK is down. France is up. In Asia, markets are mixed after minutes from the U.S. Federal Reserve's October 31st meeting revealed no indication of rate cuts. So Japan is up. Shanghai is down. Hong Kong is up. Oil is down $1.73 to $76.01 US per barrel. Gold is up $2 to $2,003.60 US per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.08 of a cent to 72.91 cents US.
Bye. See you tomorrow. Crystal Ramlakan joining us here on the radio and via Zoom this morning. She, of course, with our business report. 6:45 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM or on the app. Does everyone wave bye on Zoom or is that just me? I always wave at my guests and my columnists and Crystal Lee, my colleagues. It is clear it's -2 in the city of Winnipeg. It's -6 in Brandon, -4 in Dauphin, and clear and -16 in Thompson. Today our high in Winnipeg will be right around 0. Well, next on the program, we want to go to our listener lines because if you have been with us all this week, we've been talking about infill in the city. Tomorrow, City Council is going to vote on proposed changes that could affect zoning bylaws. They say the mayor says that this is needed, this vote to go through to access needed federal money to build housing in Winnipeg. But a lot of it involves the infill that will increase density in place neighborhoods all over the city. And so we asked for listener lines. We'll roll through some of them this morning as we continue our discussion and await that vote tomorrow. Here's one that came in.
Good morning. This is Terry Gertson calling. I'm calling in regards to this infill. We have infill going on in our area. We live off of Windermere, west of Pembina Highway. We have two right in the immediate vicinity of our place, across the back lane and a couple of houses west. We have two infill in there. They have become B&Bs, and we have probably the police there at least once every 2 weeks on average. In fact, we had one just here over the weekend. They had all our back lane taped off, and do I think infill is a good idea? As long as it's not used for B&B, I can go along with that. But if they're going to turn them into B&Bs, then I am against that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the call. Now, for a point of clarification here, Airbnbs, as the mayor shared in the show last week, have gone through some changes previous to whatever's going to happen next. So in February, City Council decided that new short-term rentals will be limited to primary residences. So you can make your own home an Airbnb. That is where a property owner lives, of course. But if you're listing a short-term rental, it will need to be licensed and you'll need to pay the accommodation tax. And other units, though, that are already around town that are Airbnbs are grandfathered in. So they will be allowed to stay standing and operate as Airbnbs. If you want to read some of those stories, by the way, go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba. And while we're talking about Airbnbs, this is just from a different perspective. The latest federal fiscal update includes $15 billion set aside to build 30,000 more homes and a crackdown on short-term rental units. So coming up, from that perspective and on that other story, we're going to get reaction from a Winnipegger who owns 3 Airbnbs. So we got two things going on. We got the vote locally on city council, but then yesterday the fiscal update also had some things that are affecting Airbnb owners. So that interview is coming up in the next hour of the show. Hope you can stay with us here. Right now it is 11 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM. In a moment, our medical column with Dr. Raj Bhardwaj is going to be talking about earaches this morning. Very common for families, but when do you go to the ER? But first, we have to touch base with Abby because I've been talking us out of this all hour. Abby, you posted incredible photos this morning. People can see them on our YouTube channel and on my Facebook page. I think there's like 40 of them. What were you taking pictures of?
So yesterday I got an alert that there's going to be a geomagnetic storm, and it started like around 7 p.m., though it was still clear out, and it peaked around 1 a.m. So I just grabbed my gears and I was like standing by at my favorite spot just to catch a glimpse of this magnificent piece that always displays in the skies of Manitoba. Now,
Abby, if you're a regular listener, you know Abby loves to take photos of the sky. He takes amazing photos of the northern lights. I had never seen photos like this, though. You mentioned geomagnetic storm. It almost looks like you caught the sky and it's still bright, but then mixed in, you can see the northern lights kind of almost waiting to come into the picture. Just amazing.
Yeah, this happens because, the sun is always, dispatching some magnetic fields that the earth would attract, and it brings those beautiful colors as a bounce off our atmosphere. But the most popular one is always green. You can get purple, you can get blue. I saw some purple ones yesterday. I saw blue ones yesterday, but a lot of people in the city saw the green one.
Just last, what was the buzz on your Facebook group? And, do you have a favorite photo of these 42?
I love the ones that are like curtains. The type you saw and said they were like touching, the horizon. Those ones are really beautiful. They come as arc also.
I've never seen colors like this all melded together. I'm calling it a sherbet sky. People can check out what we're talking about on our YouTube channel, on my Facebook page. Just gorgeous. And if you got some photos as well, please send them in to us. You can post them direct on Facebook, or you can email them to us at radio893@cbc.ca. Thank you, Abby. It is 9 minutes to 7 o'clock. We are expecting not a clear sky today, a mix of sun and cloud, a high around 0. Well, as I mentioned, earaches on our medical column today. Our host, Dr. Raj Bhardwaj, is here with some tips that just might keep you out of the doctor's office or emergency department. Hi there.
Good morning, Marcy.
So just to start here, how common is it for doctors, to see patients with earaches?
It's pretty common. I mean, if you've ever had one, you know that it can be really uncomfortable, all the way up to like debilitating pain. You can't work, you can't sleep, you can't concentrate on anything but the ear pain because it hurts so much. I was looking at some stats from the US, and they said about 30% of people with an earache will go see their doctor, and about 5% will actually end up in the emergency room. So it's pretty common, like I said, and it's a little bit more common this time of year because of all the infections going around. But earaches aren't just from ear infections. Sometimes, we see people having ear pain after going on a flight, for example, when you can't pop your ears and they stay plugged. That can go along with an earache without any infection. In the summertime, we sometimes see it related to swimming and diving when water gets into your ear and causes problems. Sometimes it's not even an ear problem that's giving you ear pain. It's from like a throat problem, a dental problem, a TMJ problem, that joint in your jaw there. But no matter what the root cause is, it can really hurt. And since people can't really see into their ear to tell what's going on, they got to come in and let us look in their ear.
Now, you mentioned a bunch of possible causes there of earaches, so it's not always an infection.
It's not always an infection. It is sometimes an infection, and it's related to the increased mucus that has that happens when you have an infection. But to understand how that works, you got to sort of understand the ear. So if you think about your ear, you've got this hole in the side of your head that goes into a tunnel that leads to a dead end. So that tunnel is called your external ear canal. And that dead end, the wall at the back of your tunnel, is your eardrum, or your tympanic membrane. And it's called a drum because it vibrates like a drum when sound waves hit it. So behind the eardrum, there's a space, a middle ear space it's called. It's usually filled with air with a tiny bit of mucus to keep it moist. I like to think of that moist little space like a little cave on the other side of your eardrum. And that little cave has a little sewer drain so that the cave doesn't just fill with fluid. So that little sewer drain, the eustachian tube, is crucial because if the cave gets filled with mucus, then your eardrum can't vibrate freely. And then the pressure difference between the air pressure in the atmosphere and the air pressure in that little cave can push on your eardrum or suck on your eardrum. And that's where the ear pain comes in. If the eardrum is pushed out or sucked in for long enough or badly enough, then it can cause a lot of pain. That pressure difference between your middle ear space, that cave, and the pressure in your ear canal is also what leads to that feeling of your hearing being plugged. You know, where you go on an airplane or you go up in an elevator and you're like, oh, my ear just popped. That popping was your eustachian tube opening and equalizing the pressure.
What causes it? Like, why would the sewer drain, as you called it, get plugged or stop working properly?
Yeah, so the most common cause is that it either swells shut because of some inflammation or it gets plugged with mucus. And, you know, whether that's a viral infection, which is maybe 85% of ear infections, but there are other things that can cause that eustachian tube to not work properly. So just a lot of air pressure changes can do it. Inflammation can do it from things like, you know, cigarette smoke or fire smoke, things like that. It's more common for the drain to get plugged in kids for a couple of reasons. One is that the little drainage tube is smaller, it's narrower, and also it's not as vertical. So it's easier for it to get blocked with especially if your mucus is a little bit thick. So that's one reason that kids get more ear infections and why sometimes they seem to grow out of frequent ear infections. Because as they grow, the eustachian tube gets more vertical and bigger around.
What can people do if they have an earache? Like, is there any way to open that eustachian tube?
So I think most people have tried popping their ears, you know, by yawning or moving your jaw.
Sure, yeah.
Chewing on gum or sucking lozenges works too. All of those things help to activate the muscles that can help to open the eustachian tube. So that's why we recommend that, for example, if you're taking a child or a baby on a flight, that you breastfeed or bottle feed during takeoff and especially landing when the air pressure in the cabin is changing fast to help their little eustachian tubes to open and then equalize the pressure between the cabin air pressure and the air pressure in their middle ear space, that little cave behind the eardrum. There's other things that you can do. You can keep your mucus more runny so that it doesn't get syrupy and thick and more likely to plug the drain. That's one reason why doctors recommend taking lots of fluids and using a humidifier when you're sick. It helps to keep your mucus runny. The other thing you can do is nasal rinses or sinus rinses. People sometimes ask, well, what about eardrops? Well, eardrops, remember, you're dropping it into a dead-end tunnel that ends at your eardrum. And most of the problem is behind your eardrum in that little cave. So putting stuff in your ear isn't usually going to help. But you can certainly take Tylenol or Advil, and that can certainly help with the pain and the inflammation. I think that's really important to do.
How do you know when you should seek medical attention and when you might need an antibiotic then?
You're only going to need an antibiotic if your infection is caused by bacteria, right? So if your ear infection is caused by a viral infection, or if you just have a lot of mucus because of allergies or fire smoke or cigarette smoke or something like that, then antibiotics aren't going to help. And even if it is a bacteria, your antibiotics are maybe going to shorten the length of discomfort in some people, not in everybody. If you look at kids with ear infections, most of them are pain-free within about 3 days, even without antibiotics. And antibiotics can decrease the number that have ongoing pain at 3 days, but not by much. So, the big thing is not, I have an ear infection, therefore I need antibiotics. The big thing is, how uncomfortable is your child, or are you otherwise? Can you manage with things like pain meds and nasal rinses? If your little one is younger than about 6 months old, then we really do want to see them. If they have immune system problems, or if anyone has immune system problems, then again, we want to see them. But not all earaches and even not all ear infections need antibiotics.
All right, Dr. Bardwash, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's our medical column, heard every Wednesday morning here on Information Radio with Dr. Raj Bardwash. It is 2 minutes to 7 o'clock. Heather Wells is in with news headlines.
Good morning. Well, you won't be driving over the Arlington Bridge this morning. The city closed the bridge yesterday after an engineering report found corrosion is making it unsafe for vehicles. Now, Point Douglas Councillor Vivian Santos hopes the other two levels of government now agree to pay for a new bridge. We're going to hear more from her. And city leaders want to step on the gas in their bid to improve Winnipeg's transit system. The Public Works Committee has passed a proposal to set June of 2025 as the rollout date for a new primary transit network. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In Winnipeg, clear -2, a high 0, and a mix of sun and cloud today. Winds this afternoon, little gusty, north 30, gusting to 50 near noon. In traffic, 788-3093, and of course, avoid Arlington. Not going to get over the bridge. Closed. Coming up on the show, Manitoba's new NDP government, in its first throne speech yesterday, said it's committing to mandating Holocaust education in the province, also committing to giving educators anti-Islamophobia toolkits. We're going to get reaction to both of those points from the throne speech coming up. Also in the next hour of the program, with Ottawa now vowing to crack down on short-term rentals, as I mentioned, we're going to speak with a Winnipeg Airbnb owner on what financial impact the new federal rules will have on her. We got that fiscal update yesterday. So stay tuned, and we will also continue to take your calls on the Arlington Bridge closure. How will it impact your life? 788-3205.
It is a big milestone that many people look forward to, the decision to have kids. But lots of young people today say they may put off having children or never have them because the cost of living is so high. I'll tell you more about that coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcy Young. We are learning more about the Israel-Hamas deal. The first Israeli hostages are expected to be freed tomorrow morning. In exchange, Israel will start releasing some Palestinian prisoners. There will be a pause in the fighting as part of this deal, and hundreds of aid trucks will be allowed into Gaza. The CBC's Briar Stewart is in Jerusalem with the latest.
From her home on the coast of Israel's Dead Sea, Camilla Telishai desperately waits to hear more about the hostage deal. Her 13-year-old granddaughter, Gail Turchansky, was kidnapped by militants from Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. Ishai is worried she won't be among the 30 children expected to be released.
And I want her. And this feeling, maybe it's not, will be. It's make me very sad.
The agreement calls for 50 hostages to be released over a 4-day period. For every 10 additional hostages released, there will be one more day with no fighting. In return, Israel will free 150 Palestinians who are imprisoned, possibly more if additional hostages are released. Today, the Israeli government published the names of those who may be freed. The majority are teens. Some are charged with throwing stones or being part of criminal organizations. Israeli citizens have a 24-hour period where they can appeal to the Supreme Court to protest their release. In Gaza, intense fighting continues, particularly in the north, while hundreds of thousands remain crammed in dismal conditions in the south. Hamas says the deal allows hundreds of more aid trucks into the area. Tom White is the director of the UN agency that works with Palestinian refugees in Gaza.
We'll use the opportunity to try and repair some of the infrastructure, particularly things like water lines that were impossible to do whilst the conflict was raging.
The deal, while brokered by international officials, including from the US and Qatar, is still fragile. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Leaders from around the world are reacting to the temporary ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Freelance reporter Rebecca Collard is joining me from Beirut, and she's been following reaction from the Middle East. Rebecca, what are we hearing from other nations?
What we have heard from countries in this region and Arab leaders really since October 7th is that these humanitarian pauses, temporary truces are not enough. They want to see a full ceasefire to this conflict. And I think even more importantly than that, they have been talking about the fact that there needs to be a resolution to the underlying problems that resulted in this war since October 7th. So they have talked about the need to end the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, talked about the need to end the siege on Gaza, and talking about moving to a real solution to this conflict, a two-state solution, Palestinian sovereignty. So, this is, of course, is being welcomed, but again, it's not what countries in this region were asking for. They're asking for a full cessation of hostilities. And the last thing I'll say is, as this agreement was being announced, we heard that Iran's foreign minister is making a tour of the region. He will be today in Lebanon, and it will be interesting to watch and hear what he has to say about this agreement and about the continuation of this conflict.
What is the situation at the border between Lebanon and Israel?
Yeah, Marcy, it'll be very interesting to see what happens here on Lebanon's southern border with Israel, because, of course, we've seen almost daily exchanges of fire across that border. And this agreement that we're talking about does not cover that border. It is not an agreement between Israel and Hezbollah or Israel and any of the militant groups that have been firing from Lebanon into northern Israel. So at the moment we're seeing those exchanges of fire continue, we don't know whether or not this agreement will also mean a relief in the fighting across that border, because, of course, Hezbollah has been so clear that the reason that they are doing this is in solidarity with the people of Gaza, in solidarity with Palestinians, and to really detract from Israel's ability to do these military operations in the Gaza Strip. So we'll have to see now, and I'll be watching very closely the border as this agreement comes into effect, whether or not this will also mean a cessation of hostilities, at least temporary, on the border here.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
The CBC's Rebecca Collard in Beirut. The United Nations General Assembly has voted in favor of an Olympic truce resolution ahead of next year's Summer Games in Paris. The vote is a tradition before every Olympics and is largely symbolic. It calls on countries to pause all military aggression while the Games are underway. Thomas Bach is president of the International Olympic Committee.
I cannot remember a time when the world was facing so much confrontation, division, and polarization. The scourge of war and violence is growing.
113 countries voted in favor of the resolution. Canada was one of them. Russia and Syria abstained. India has restored its e-visa services for Canadians. In September, the Indian government suspended the electronic visa service, citing operational reasons. Around that time, Ottawa had accused the Indian government of being involved in the murder of a Sikh activist in British Columbia. The Indian government has denied any involvement. The federal government says it has presented Canadians with a vision for the future, one that is hopeful and achievable. The fall economic statement unveiled billions in new spending, but as Peter Armstrong reports, the mini budget is still built on hope that things will get better and not worse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is trying to strike a difficult balance. On the one hand, the economy remains exceptionally weak. Sure, Canada's forecast to avoid an outright recession, but GDP hasn't budged in months. Unemployment, prices, and borrowing costs are all high and continue to rise. Still, Freeland says her government is doing what it can to help ease the cost of living crisis.
Our goal is to help Canadians through an incredibly challenging time.
But with inflation still well outside the Bank of Canada's target range, there's only so much the feds can do. If they spend too much, they can add to the inflationary pressures already weighing on the economy. But the real concern is that instead of getting better, weak spots like GDP, job growth, or inflation could get worse. Kevin Page, president of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa, says signs of weakness are already seeping through the economy.
Yeah, weakness is a defining characteristic. We had no growth in the second quarter. We're likely to see no growth in the third quarter. We'll get those numbers.
The final numbers that make up those third quarter growth figures come out next week, and they aren't going to be pretty. But if they're even a little worse than expected, the basic assumptions in the economic statement could get washed away. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Ottawa.
In Silicon Valley, whichever company gets tech entrepreneur Sam Altman probably gets to control the future of artificial intelligence. Yesterday, that was Microsoft. Today, it's OpenAI. That's right. After being fired on Friday, Altman has been rehired by the maker of ChatGPT. CBC business reporter Scott Peterson is following the twists and turns of this corporate drama. Scott, take us through what's happened.
Twists and turns is right. I think a lot of people have a hard time keeping up with what happened over the weekend. First of all, Sam Altman ousted as the OpenAI CEO, OpenAI owner of ChatGPT, the leading artificial intelligence company in the world, you could argue. He was the founder, the CEO. He was the brains behind the whole project. So the corporate drama that unfolded from there, he was hired for Microsoft. The staff had threatened to revolt and follow him over, including the chief of the board and also the investors there. It's a private company. They saw the potential of their $87 billion investment completely collapsing. So there was a lot of pressure on that board, a nonprofit board, to reverse themselves. And what made it possible for him to now return to the company is that 3 out of the 4 board members that voted him out are no longer on that board. So it's a clean slate, if you will, and he's back where he started last week.
At the heart of this, Scott, is a disagreement about how to safely build artificial intelligence. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusing signals by the OpenAI board of directors. They were concerned clearly about how quickly Sam Altman was moving to commercialize artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. They wanted to put in more guardrails, some speed bumps to slow that down, because being a nonprofit board, they were motivated by their conscience and not necessarily by a profit motive. But they quickly realized that this was a mistake. Sam Altman, was not only just the CEO, he was a co-founder, he was a visionary. The majority of the staff wanted to follow him, and so hence they saw their mistake very quickly. And the reason Microsoft as well was so accommodative as far as hiring him and allowing him to go back is they own about half of OpenAI and thought it would be a better place for him to continue his work there on the benefit of Microsoft and everyone else.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thanks, Marcy.
The CBC Scott Peterson in our Toronto studio. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Markusa at 7:10 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the CBC Listen app or on our YouTube channel online. Thanks for joining us on the morning show. Not going to be too bad today. The forecast in a moment. This hour on the program, we are going to be talking more about something that was announced yesterday in the federal fiscal update. It includes $15 billion to build 30,000 more homes and a crackdown on short-term rental units. We're going to get some reaction and analysis from a Winnipegger who owns 3 Airbnb properties. So stay tuned. That's coming up at 10 to 8. Also this hour on the program at 7:40, we will hear more about the Arlington Bridge closure. Heather Wells in a moment to tee up what happened there. And what a busy day politically. We also had the first speech from the throne from the new NDP government. One of the aspects of it was a commitment to mandating Holocaust education. We'll hear from a local advocate. So that is this half hour on the program. In addition, I should mention that yesterday the announcement was also made that in the throne speech to give educators anti-Islamophobia toolkits, and that was also one of the commitments. So we'll have reaction to both of those points. Right now, though, let's talk Arlington. Here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Yes, the closure of the Arlington Bridge is reviving calls from North End City councillors for a fair share of major infrastructure projects. The city closed the bridge yesterday, and it may not open again. An engineering study found too much corrosion in the 112-year-old bridge. So we'll hear more on that. And Manitobans may soon be able to access free birth control with a prescription. Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the NDP government is prioritizing women's health care. Asseguera says it's important to remove barriers for those who need it. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Pat Canuga, what's the forecast like?
Good morning, everyone. Well, we're a little bit colder than we have been, and we're going to get a little bit colder than we have been. How's that in a nutshell? So we're going to see a 0 today. It is -3. We're down 1 in the past hour at the Forks. A -9 tomorrow, a -5 on Friday. For the weekend, a -2 and a -4. So decent single-digit temperatures here on the minus side. Hovering about average for what this time of year brings us. -4 is the daytime high, -13 for the overnight. And that's pretty much what we're going to see for the next few days here. Lots of sunshine, though. So you're out and about. Might have to experience a little bit of wind chill. Keep that in mind as well. I found that wind yesterday afternoon pretty brisk, and I was not expecting that. So it's the time of year where maybe you get out the long johns, and just know that if you're out and about, you might notice a little bit of wind chill, especially with the winds hovering. Going to be gusting around 40 by noon from the, from the north. So that's for Winnipeg today. I'll mention quickly, Brandon is -4, and Thompson's a chilly -18 at this hour. And Brandon's going to see a daytime high of -1. Thompson, you're only going to improve a few degrees to a -14. And we'll just mention very quickly the wind warning for Churchill and York. Seeing wind gusts up to 80 this morning already, could go up to 90 because of that storm that's in Nunavut that's been bringing these powerful winds to the Churchill-York regions for the past couple of days. And it's -14 in Churchill right now, and that's where you are going to stay. Let's move to traffic. No reports of stalls, crashes, anything like that. Of course, the Arlington Bridge is the big story. Starting at about 2:30 yesterday afternoon, closed indefinitely. So with Arlington being closed, McPhillips or Salter or Main are kind of your main arteries there. Even Route 90 as well, if you really want to avoid it. But that's a little bit out of your way. Now, we're asking you for your input this morning. What are your thoughts on the Arlington Bridge? They've been studying it for decades, it seems like, and it's, 121 years old? So we're asking for your listener lines at 788-3205. Here's one that we got this morning.
My name is Vivian, and the Arlington Bridge closure is going to double the gas to and from work and also double the time. That bridge should have been replaced with a better bridge many years ago, and it still should be. We need it. It's an arterial route to the north of the city, and there's all kinds of designs out there that you can make that can have, you can have a bi-level one, north on one level, south on the other level, pedestrian and bike lanes. There's all kinds of things you could do to it because it is the 21st century, and we need that bridge. And unless the government wants to pony up for gas, they should replace it. Thank you.
Thanks for the call, Vivian. So 788-3205 once again.
How much money is this going to take from the city? There's a reason it's been repaired over the years, right? The cost of replacement of that bridge is...
Wasn't it $300 million?
It's huge.
Yeah, it's a lot of dough.
But we obviously are at this point now where the city's going to have to figure out how to move forward. So a new assessment coming likely in February. Right now it's closed. So we're getting comments as well because it does affect a lot of people's lives. It's a critical point in our city's connection between north and south. So Donovan Yasik wrote, increased traffic on McPhillips is going to make my morning cycle commute a bit more dangerous. Last time it was closed, the Arlington Bridge, some impatient drivers frustrated with slower progress would dart into the diamond lanes, then use them to get ahead. And I sympathize. Being stuck in a car and not moving is the worst thing, but I'm on a bike and it's dangerous. A lot of people talking about all the traffic on McPhillips that, could be funneled over to McPhillips. Catherine Barron's, finally, McPhillips underpass also floods, she weighs in. It's going to be difficult. Is it even feasible, though, to move the railway yards? And we've looked at that extensively over the years. She writes, we use Arlington Bridge to nip over into the south end and down to our favorite bakery, and we go to DeLuca's and the granola belt, she writes. So she's just talking about some of the businesses here on the south side of the bridge.
And we should mention, coming up after Heather's News at 7:30, we'll hear from two city councillors on the Arlington Bridge issue.
Well, next on CBC's Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. For years, Manitoba advocates have called for the government to prioritize Holocaust education. And as we've been sharing with you, now the NDP government wants people to know their calls for change have been heard. Yesterday, during the throne speech, Premier Wab Kinew shared his commitment to mandating Holocaust education in our province. The announcement comes as rates of anti-Semitism continue to soar in Manitoba and across the country. Last month, British Columbia joined the growing list of provinces with mandated Holocaust education. Ontario expanded its Holocaust curriculum as well to high school students. Beldra Newski is the executive director of the Jewish Heritage Centre for Western Canada, which is based here in Winnipeg. She says that mandating Holocaust education is a necessary step in the right direction. CBC's Susan Magus spoke with her to learn more.
I'm pleased that Manitoba has followed the lead of other provinces in mandating Holocaust education. I know that this is something that I and many others have been hoping for many years. And in fact, there are people that have been involved with the Jewish Heritage Center that were lobbying the government back in the 1970s. So that's how long it's taken. I think that it has really taken time for countries to understand why this is so important, how lacking students are in their knowledge about the Holocaust, also not understanding perhaps the importance about learning about this watershed event in human history, and that Holocaust education is a key tool for countering prejudice and cultivating inclusion. So, it's not just about this tragedy that happened, of course, to the Jewish people, but its implications for broader society, and that when students learn about the Holocaust, they engage with very complicated moral questions, some that do not come with simple answers, and critical thinking is also a big part of this. As well, I think it's important for students to learn about the peripheral role that Canada played at that time.
You met with education officials. Can you tell me more about what you sort of discussed in the conversation about how this would roll out, how the students would experience it?
Well, really what we did is we talked about, of course, why it's important. I provided them with some resources. We know that students today, unfortunately, many students know little about the Holocaust. And by mandating the education, we can also provide broader professional development programs for teachers. We have been doing that for many years in partnership with Manitoba Education and Training. But if it's mandated, we're going to get more teachers throughout Manitoba taking part in these programs and providing them with resources. Nobody needs to reinvent the wheel. There are tremendous resources for teachers out there at a number of different grade levels. And we also have Canadian content. We have the Israeli Foundation, for instance, that provides survivor memoir books about survivors who settled in Canada, telling their story, that are free for all schools in Canada as well as all libraries.
How much of a role do you think the conflict in the Middle East is having in making this kind of conversation move up in the priority list, particularly for governments here in Canada?
There has been such an upsurge in anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hate that has come to our doorstep. We are seeing fear in the Jewish community. We are seeing threats. We're seeing even some violence. It is through education that we can combat hate. And education about the Holocaust is something that combats not only anti-Jewish hate, but helps students learn about how words can turn into violence, how it can teach about early warnings for genocide, and much more.
So that's Belle Jarnewski, the Executive Director of the Jewish Heritage Center for Western Canada, based here in Winnipeg. Now, during the throne speech yesterday, the government also committed to giving educators anti-Islamophobia toolkits prepared by Manitoba's Muslim community. The announcement comes amidst the war between Israel and Hamas. The Manitoba Islamic Association is creating the new toolkit. Tasneem Valley is with the association, and CBC's Susan Magus also spoke with her.
As a nation, we are working through truth and reconciliation. Part of that is understanding each other's culture. Part of that is understanding what we go through and experience in an environment that might not be, that everybody might not know where you're coming from per se, or what your past experiences have been, or what your culture has been, right? So this is a very important toolkit to educate educators, so that when they are addressing children in their classroom or in a different setting, to know where they're coming from, to understand that there might be a background to something a child is saying and to understand context. We're hoping that part of the mandate of the provincial government now is also to have a more diverse representation of teaching staff in our schools. and that helps a great deal. To have library resources in schools available with books and stories and story time that actually represent, again, the diversity that is in the classroom, that is in our communities currently, right? So if you're reading a book about Christmas, you should also be able to read a book about Ramadan, and you should also be able to read a book about Hanukkah. You should, where the child feels, okay, my character, somebody like me, is in this book and is experiencing exactly what I experienced. Sometimes teachers might not be aware of those resources that are factual and that are non-prejudicial, non-biased.
And how urgent do you feel the need is given what's happening in the world right now?
Children are very confused because they do have friends, they have cousins that are in that part of the world, and they're hearing that, your cousin cannot talk to you, or your cousin may have died, or, very, very difficult conversations to have for 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and they're not understanding. So I think it's very important for teachers to understand and to have resources available where they can understand context. And it's about what the child is going through on a personal level, because they're seeing images where a child like them, that looks like them, is maybe buried under rubble or is not going to school.
That's Tasneem Valley, a member of the Manitoba Islamic Association, in conversation with CBC's Susan Magus about the throne speech yesterday. If you want to weigh in on the throne speech, you can always reach out to us. You want to read more about it? It is the new NDP government's first speech from the throne, the commitments as read by the Lieutenant Governor of Manitoba. You can check out our stories online at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Calm and clear in Winnipeg, -3, and you're continuing to call us about what it is like out there to take the bus.
Hi, my name is Lisa Backstead. I take a bus all the time. Yesterday was already a start of a horrible day, very cold. We're standing out there for at least a half an hour. By the time the bus finally came, there was quite a crowd at Kimberley and Henderson, and everyone was so disappointed because 3 buses passed us, all not in service. We were all happy a bus was coming, just to read not in service. Our transit system is really bad. I've taken a bus all my life, and the service has only gotten worse. And I hear bus drivers saying they're going to retire or they're going to quit because they're sick of the system.
Thank you very much for the call, Lisa. You're not the only one that's called us. We're going to air more calls this morning about what it is like to take the bus in Winnipeg. And a lot of what prompted these calls was a Winnipeg family that they said, in their words, they have a choice. They don't have to take the bus. But they came on to tell us their story because they chose to take the bus, give up the car, and then they went back to the car because of what the system was like from their eyes. City Councillor Janice Lukes has said there's a shortage of drivers. They're working on a new system, and it will be developed throughout next year and into 2025. But right now, what is it like for you out there? 788-3205. More calls coming up in the show this hour. Right now, let's get to morning sports with Scott Reguer. Hello to you.
Hey there, Marcy.
So still recuperating from Sunday's heartbreaking loss in the Grey Cup. The Bombers have another cause for concern. So let's revisit this long list of players who are about to become free agents.
Yeah, it's a formidable list. I don't know who headlines it exactly. Maybe Dalton Schoen, the best receiver on the team, becoming a free agent. You look at the offensive line, all-stars Stanley Bryant, Jamarcus Hardrick, they're both up for free agency. Then you've got the defensive ends, Jackson Jeffcoat, Willie Jefferson. It is something else. How many players the Bombers are hoping to bring back and might not be able to. But it's headlined, I think most would agree, by Brady Oliveira, the Winnipeg native, the most outstanding player, Canadian player in the league this past season. And Brady, Marcy, shared his thoughts on what's next.
You never really know what's going to happen, right, when you're a free agent. The last 2 seasons that I've put together, I think we're good enough to get what I deserve, right? So, but we'll see. Obviously this is a dream, but to play at the highest possible level, right? So the NFL stuff would of course be a dream. But obviously this is where I want to be, if the NFL doesn't work out.
Yeah, the NFL, it's every football player's dream, not just because it's the highest level of the game, but because you get paid so much more. That said, running back, if there's a tougher position out there to make it in the NFL, I don't know what it is, because they are in plentiful supply running backs. Although not everybody is like Brady Oliveira, built like a bowling ball and with exceptional speed. So he'll have a shot, but just as we saw with Dalton Schoen last year when he tried his luck south of the border, it's certainly no guarantee.
That's how I'm built, but without the speed.
I'm not touching that. I'm not touching it.
I'm not really, actually. It's funny, though. Over to soccer, where Canada's men's team has taken a big step backward.
Yeah, has it ever, Marcy? Playing at home to Jamaica last night, everything seemed to be going according to plan. About half an hour in, Alphonso Davies scored. He gave Canada a 3-1 lead on aggregate in the home and away series. And in wet, near freezing conditions in Toronto, it was pretty tough seeing the Caribbean side coming back at that point. History certainly didn't support their case. Canada hadn't lost in that stadium in Toronto in 13 years, after all. So you can see where this is all going. The Reggae Boys scored thrice in the second half to claim the series and a spot in next year's Copa America, one of the world's most prestigious tournaments. Goalie Milan Borjan, he of the old school sweatpants and fine sense of humor, was not in a laughing mood.
We got to sit down all together, look each other in the eyes and see what went wrong. To have players like that and to do something like this, it's not acceptable. I'm very, very angry. As a captain, I'm sorry to the nation, but we got another chance in March for the Copa America, and we'll try to do everything, bounce back and try to make our nation happy.
Yeah, what a difference a year makes. Tomorrow, the anniversary of Canada's return to the World Cup after 36 years of trying.
And just quick before you go, there's going to be an unlikely halftime act for one of tomorrow's NFL games on American Thanksgiving.
Care to venture a guess as to whose voice that is? And it's no one from Queen.
No, my answer was going to be not Queen. So,
a queen of the trade, Dolly Parton, is going to perform at halftime for the Dallas-Washington game. You know, in 55 years, she's never not only done an NFL game, she's never done a sporting event before.
Wow.
So this is a first. That should be lots of fun tomorrow.
No doubt. All right, Scott, thank you.
You bet.
Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. Well, still ahead, some in the news. We're going to hear more about Arlington Bridge and then more analysis following. Right now, though, it is that time, 7:30, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, we've lost a degree. It is now -3 in downtown Winnipeg. Mix of sun and clouds today. That wind is going to switch directions from southerly to northerly around noon, and it's going to chill us. A high of 0, but overnight a low of -13. We begin in the Middle East, where Israel insists it is not a ceasefire, but an agreement has been reached on a 4-day pause in the fighting in Gaza. The agreement means some of the hostages being held in the territory will be released and humanitarian aid can start flowing again. As for Canadians still looking to get out of Gaza, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says she hopes the 4-day pause in fighting will allow all foreign nationals to leave the territory. However, no Canadians are on today's list of those approved to cross into Egypt. Global Affairs says roughly 200 Canadians continue to wait for the green light to leave Gaza through the Rafah crossing. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Now, the head of the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada applauds a move by the new Manitoba NDP government to make education about the Holocaust mandatory. Belle Jarneski says people have been lobbying the government for almost 50 years. She met with the new education minister 10 days ago to explain why teaching about the Holocaust is so important.
Holocaust education is a key tool for countering prejudice and cultivating inclusion. It's not just about this tragedy that happened, of course, to the Jewish people, but its implications for broader society.
Jarneski recommends the province make Holocaust education part of the grade 11 Canadian history curriculum. Now, the Manitoba Islamic Association also met recently with the new education minister. That group is finalizing a new toolkit for the government, which it plans to make available to help teachers deal with Islamophobia in schools. Tasneem Valley is with the association and says it's so important to provide extra supports now.
Especially with all the events happening now, all the foreign events that happen affect us at home here, just because we are such a diverse nation, right? Everybody has somebody who is being affected by something that is going on around the world.
Valley says the new toolkit will be available in 2 weeks. It will include a reading list for educators and students based on their ages, and will also have lesson plans and a video for teachers. Well, you won't be driving over the Arlington Bridge this morning. The city closed the bridge yesterday after an engineering report found corrosion, making it unsafe for vehicles. The long-term fate of the Arlington Bridge should be known in a couple of months. Another report coming out in February is expected to say whether the bridge can be fixed again. Point Douglas councillor Vivian Santos hopes the other 2 levels of government agree to pay for a new bridge.
Maybe this closure may be that light that we need to say to those other levels, saying, look, it's needed in the North End. We need this investment.
The city had a plan to replace Arlington Bridge 5 years ago. The price tag was $330 million. You can hear more on the Arlington Bridge coming up in this next half hour right here on Information Radio. The Manitoba government is making birth control free for all Manitobans with a prescription. The announcement came in the NDP throne speech, an election promise of Premier Wab Kinew. Caitlin Bloxham at Clinic Community Health says there's a real need for affordable and accessible birth control right around the province.
Individuals have a right to control over their body and the right to take a medication to prevent a pregnancy if they do not want to have a pregnancy. And that is a right that should be available to everyone, and currently cost is a huge barrier.
The NDP previously pegged the cost to implement the universal coverage of select contraceptives at $11 million a year. BC is the only province currently offering free birth control. A shortage of transit drivers could be the biggest roadblock to Winnipeg's hopes for a better transit system. That's according to the city's transit union. It says 44% of its membership will be eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. Union President Chris Scott says the city needs to do a better job recruiting and retaining transit drivers.
We can redesign the routes all we want, but the service levels needed to serve the demand of the public can't be met without those employees.
The city's Public Works Committee yesterday passed a proposal to set June 2025 as the rollout day for a new primary transit network. The original target was 2026. And after years of fighting to keep the invasive species out, Parks Canada says it has found zebra mussels in Clear Lake. Officials say they have just received test results from water samples collected through the summer. They found zebra mussel DNA at Boat Cove. More sampling confirms live zebra mussels there. The boat launch area is closed until next year, and Parks Canada is still analyzing the results. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Walls.
You're welcome.
Pat Kanuga, the regional forecast.
Good morning, everyone. Well, we're mostly cloudy right now, looking out of our window here at Studio 15 at the quarter of Portage and Spence. The sun is going to rise at 7:52, and then we'll get a better look at how much clouds are out there.
And go to our Facebook page, my Facebook page, Marcy Markusa. I reposted Abby's photos from last night.
To see the sky from last night. Yes.
Some of you have seen these. A group of 40 are describing it as it looks like an opal. There's so many colors in it. It was just amazing. Yeah.
I missed that.
I know. I was sleeping
Abby stays
too.
up all night looking at this stuff. Thank you, Abby. We appreciate you for doing
taking it for the
that.
team.
I say he'll post a picture at 2:30 in the morning. Like, what is he doing? But thank you, Abby. So we'll see how much of the way of clouds are out there. But we expect to see a mix of sun and cloud today. We'll get to a 0. We're at -3 right now. Some wind gusting to 40 or roughly 50 around noon or so. So that's going to be from the north. So a little bit blustery out there. We'll feel some wind chill as well with that 0. About -14 this afternoon because of that wind. then tonight we'll dip down to a minus 13. We're starting to get cold overnight here. Tomorrow, a daytime high of minus 9, the coldest day of the week with a daytime high of minus 9. Then minus 15 tomorrow night into Friday. We'll see a minus 5 on Friday for a daytime high, but then we warm up for the weekend a little bit. Minus 2 Saturday, minus 4 on Sunday, and we have a good chance of a flurry Saturday into Sunday morning. Over in Brandon, minus 4 on the way to a minus 1. Gusty winds to 50 this morning from the north as well. Tonight, minus 19, a cold one, and then tomorrow, sunshine and a high of minus 9 for Brandon. Thompson, you're minus 18, mainly sunny today. You're going to warm up to a minus 14. That's all. Tonight, minus 20. Warmer tomorrow, though, with a daytime high of minus 10 with a mix of sun and cloud. And I should just mention quickly the wind warning for Churchill York region. We've had gusts to 80 this morning in that region because of the storm, the winter storm that's moving through Nunavut, and it's bringing these really strong winds to that Churchill York region. And we could see wind gusts to 90 later on in the day or later this morning. Some quick temps for you right now. We're looking at zeros, minus ones for the most part. Steinbach will see a 0, minus 3 right now. Verdun, minus 2 on the way to a minus 1. Southeast corner, Pinawa, you're minus 5 to a minus 1 on the way to a minus 1. And Pilot Mound, Crystal City area, good morning to you. Minus 4 on the way to a minus 1 as well. And Dauphin Parkland, minus 4. That's where you will stay today. Once again, we're minus 3 in the city of Winnipeg. In traffic, pretty quiet as far as any calls to the traffic line. 788-3093 is the traffic line. Some good news out of town, Highway 75 southbound, the construction that's been slowing you down on the way to Pembina, North Dakota. It's all open. 2 lanes, smooth sailing now after that construction. But inside the city, the bad news, of course, is the Arlington Bridge, what we've been talking about all morning. It is closed indefinitely. Your alternate routes are McPhillips, Salter, and Maine, Marcy.
So you're saying that traffic's quiet, but the traffic line might be quiet. The listener line's not quiet. People are calling about Arlington. People are calling about transit. Getting around this city is a challenge for a lot of people. So let's look specifically at Arlington next. After 111 years of service, as we've been telling you, the Arlington Bridge is closed indefinitely. So this is a connection between the inner city and the north end, from the north to the south end. But after an inspection found the structure was deteriorating rapidly, the city shuttered the bridge as a precautionary measure. So there had been talk of replacing the bridge since 2011. And in fact, if you look at the article online from CBC's Bartley Kivas, City Council was first told the bridge was approaching the end of its useful life in 1967. But in 2018, engineers, and moving forward in time here, created a plan for a new 3-lane bridge. So we did have a plan in the books in 2018. But that bridge, that plan would have cost $330 million, money that the city didn't have. Let's hear from the councillors whose constituencies are most affected in neighbourhoods. Vivian Santos is the city councillor for Point Douglas. She says when it comes to infrastructure, the North End often gets the short end of the stick. CBC's Bartley Kivas spoke to her.
You know, the plan that came out in 2018, if there was $330 million, would have given us a bridge by next year, but that's not going to happen. So what would you tell people in your ward who use that bridge? What would you tell them long term?
You know, I think what we need to do is just have a little bit more patience, because we know, and I know it sounds kind of repetitive, that we're doing another report on the feasibility of the longevity of for like another 25 years or possibly decommissioning. So with that in mind, I'd like to support that. I supported that in the previous budget with the new mayor, about looking at what that would look like. So, yes, you know, our residents who walk and cycle use that bridge constantly. It is upsetting for the community that lives in that neighborhood. We tried, you know, last term to put it into the budget, but I think I have more faith in our new mayor, new council, and our new provincial government, that hoping that we can get more partners in aligned to fund it, because we know that if we're going to look at the feasibility of, you know, extending it for another 25 years, we know it's going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So if that's the case, then why don't we just go ahead and replace it, right? So that's kind of what we're kind of dealt with right now, and I want to be more hopeful than anything.
Nonetheless, when I look back at the past decade, I look at projects that were listed as lower infrastructure priorities that ended up getting funded and built. They weren't in the North End, though. So any thoughts on that?
It always seems like, the North End always gets the short end of the stick when it comes to infrastructure. Again, I like to feel that with the new provincial government, knowing that most of their, representation is in the North End, we could see some more movement and more partnership with other levels of government to actually fund the new bridge, because that is quite a bit of money, right? We are looking at, now it's not going to be 330 million. It's definitely going to be about 350, maybe even more, $375 million because of construction inflation. So we really need other levels of government to really partner with the City of Winnipeg on this project. It's about time that the North End gets more funding, especially when it comes to infrastructure dollars, and getting our fair share of that. But without putting more, we need to put more pressure on those levels of government. And, who knows, maybe this closure may be that light that we need to say to those other levels, saying, look, it's needed in the North End. We need this investment.
Vivian Santos is a city councillor for Point Douglas, in conversation there with the CBC's Bartley Kivas. Now, point of clarification on the dates, because I know a lot of you are saying, how old is the Arlington Bridge? So the piles on that bridge date to 1881. It was first a train bridge. The rest of it was rebuilt in the 1910 to carry automobile traffic, but the rest of it was rebuilt in 1910 to carry cars. The bridge was built over the CPR Winnipeg yards in 1911. So those are your dates. So we're over 100 years. The final fate of Arlington Bridge will not be known until early next year. City Councillor Ross Eady asked for patience while residents wait for more information on the bridge's future. He also spoke with CBC's Bartley Kivas.
Ever since I was elected, we knew that the Arlington Bridge always had to be closed down for some serious maintenance of steel and so on, to make sure that people could continue to use it. And then, moving up to the last election, essentially, after discussions with our current mayor and others, they put aside $850,000, and it's those people who are studying the bridge who are saying that it has to be closed down because it's gotten way worse. So I feel for those people that use it. And I don't know if you want to call it an inconvenience, but it's an important bridge that's needed by thousands of people.
So in 2011, the city first talked about replacing it. There was a 2016 study, and in 2018, they looked at putting in a $330 million bridge by 2024. The city couldn't find the money for that. How do you feel about the fact that this link was put off while other underpasses like Waverly, like Kenaston, like Plessy were done?
In behind the scenes, I just want to be clear, like I've always been pushing for replacement. So I was waiting for the study, which is going to tell you it's going to be in the hundreds of millions just to keep it alive for 25 years, but it won't be usable by cyclists. I'll tell you that's very steep and pedestrians use it, but ultimately, I'd like to see the actual Arlington bus go all the way down Arlington on a new bridge. So it is very irritating that, for example, the Waverly underpass did get done. The Arlington Bridge wasn't even, at that point, and Bowman was there, it wasn't even really ranked, although it should have been ranked as number one to replace. Arlington Bridge will require 3 levels of government to try to replace it, because it is a huge chunk of money, and I think we're going to be raising our debt ceiling. But the current mayor, and this is the problem, and what Councillor Santos and Gilroy, Eady and Sharma, what we're fighting for, and we also want Cheap Peguis to go through, but the mayor chooses and wants to ignore it because he wants his widening of Kenaston, right? So this is always the competing interest. Who's the mayor? What does the mayor care about?
Ross Eady, the city councillor for Menarski, in conversation there with the CBC's Bartley Kivas. Well, the Arlington Bridge, as I mentioned, is representative of so many things. It's a traffic. It's obviously important to commuters. It's a connection for people, north-south. But it also is representative, as you heard, of the city and our history. So where do we go from here, and what's the impact going to be on your life now that it's suddenly closed? Here's a call that came in this morning.
Hi, my name is Margaret, and I have a question about the Arlington Bridge street closure. Is the city, in the meantime, going to improve traffic flow by either extending the length of time the turning light is on, turning left off of Logan onto Salter Bridge, or better yet, making 2 lanes turn left onto Salter Bridge off of Logan? Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, we're awaiting what more information might come about how this will be handled, and we'll have to see. Of course, this just was announced yesterday, quite suddenly, to those of us who haven't been, sort of didn't expect it just close like that indefinitely. So they'll be reassessing in February. But what will they do in the meantime for traffic? We'll let you know when we get some more detailed responses. Please read Bartley Kivas' web story on this. Got a lot of details, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Right now, we are going to go to Facebook. My page, Marcy Markusa page on Facebook acts as a show page during the show. Pat's been looking at comments that are coming in as we asked about Arlington Bridge.
Yeah, I'll just throw a couple on here, Marcy. So Cliff Donaldson wrote in, he said, "It will affect my commute. Currently, I use McPhillips to get south of the rail tracks. I have seen when the Arlington Bridge is closed and McPhillips slows down and backs up. I would like to use my bike route more, but there is no active transportation route. So you take your chances on Salter, McPhillips, and Arlington." Also got a call from Ian Walker. "The city should focus its limited infrastructure money on replacing the bridge instead of building the Chief Peguist extension. We can't afford new roads." So that from Ian Walker. So just a couple of responses there for you, but please do weigh in on Marcy's Facebook page, or you can call us on the listener line at 788-3205. It's a big issue that's affecting lots of people this morning as you sit in your car on those alternate routes.
All right, thanks, Pat. 788-3205. And on Facebook, I'm Marcy Markusa.
Do you have ideas on how CBC can become more accessible? Well, we want to hear from you. How can CBC become a barrier-free public broadcaster for people living with disabilities? We'd like to invite you to share your ideas with us by registering for our public consultations at cbc.radio-canada.ca/accessibility. With your help, we can make CBC more accessible for all.
It is 11 minutes to 8 o'clock on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. It is, hopefully going to clear up out there. It's starting to in Winnipeg, downtown. Winds are calm and will be around a high of 0 today. We are expecting, though, it's going to get a bit windier around the lunchtime. It's going to be winds north 30 gusting to 50. I should mention also, I've been talking so much about southern Manitoba. We've got a wind warning for Churchill, York today, so strong winds, they could cause damage. There's that powerful winter storm that's moving through. It came from Nunavut, and that's what's causing the winds. So it could continue to cause big problems as winds continue to gust as high as 90 kilometers per hour in some places. Coming up on the program after 8 o'clock on the show, the city of Winnipeg is drafting a bylaw right now to ban hookah use at businesses in Winnipeg. And also cigar shops may be affected by this bylaw if it goes through. We asked on the use of hookah, what will it mean to people who go to hookah lounges in the city? CBC's Jim Agapito found out. He was out and about yesterday talking to business owners and people who frequent those lounges. So that's coming up for you on the program after 8 o'clock. Stay with us here on 89.3. Right now, though, the federal Liberals were busy yesterday. They tabled their fall fiscal update with $15 billion set aside for new loans to build 30,000 more homes, $1 billion for affordable housing, and a crackdown on short-term rentals like Airbnbs. So here are some of the details. Ottawa is going to deny income tax deductions for anyone claiming expenses on Airbnbs. But that is only in provinces or cities that have already banned short-term rentals. So that won't affect people here in the same way. But across the country, people will be affected. They will also be looking at cracking down at Airbnb owners that don't meet license and permit rules. It is also going to provide $50 million over 4 years to help cities enforce short-term rental rules. So we wondered, hearing all of this, what are short-term rental owners and Airbnb owners thinking. Melanie Mitchell's in studio with us. Melanie owns 3 Airbnbs in Winnipeg. She's also the president of the Manitoba Association of Short-Term Rental Owners. Good morning.
Good morning.
Lots of talk about short-term rentals right now. What's your reaction when you're hearing sort of some of the discussions and the rules that came out yesterday?
Well, the exact rules written don't apply to me because they're only if you're not in compliance, and I have no intentions of not being in compliance. However, it's unsettling to have the federal government put my industry under a microscope in this manner. The words like curb, convert, restrict. I'm getting pretty sick and tired of being villainized by the media, by the governments of all levels. I'm just trying to make a living, and so are all my peers. This is a highly sought after business. The clients love it. The market demands it. And it would be like getting rid of it at this point would be like telling Tim Hortons they can't sell coffee any longer.
Was there a shift in public opinion around Airbnbs, or a shift in the tone of, as you said, I think you said, did you use the word vilify maybe? It feels like people are, was there a shift where people at first were like, this is great, rent your houses out, what a great business, and get into it, and then somewhere along the line, they started to get a bad name? What's your view?
I feel like the government is using the short-term rental industry as a scapegoat or a sacrificial lamb in order to appear that they're doing something about the huge housing crisis. Short-term rentals predate Airbnb and VRBO and companies like that by decades. I was renovating one of my long-term rental houses recently, and I found a newspaper in the wall from January 23rd, 1953. The front page says, housing crisis must be solved by the end of the year. City stretched to their limit. So somehow there's been no housing strategy since before I was born. And now somehow it's my responsibility and my peers in this industry to clean up some mess that's been ignored forever. And it's never been the responsibility of private landowners to provide affordable housing and subsidized housing on behalf of the government.
I just want to mention that part of what's framing our discussion this morning was in the yesterday's fiscal statement, the idea that having long-term renters will be less stressful for owners. Like they're trying to position it this way, saying encouraging Airbnb, rental owners to say, if you have long-term rentals, it could be less turnover, less potential problems with changes in renters. It could be more stable. What's your response to that?
That has never been my experience. I have over 20 years in long-term rentals and 5 years in short-term rentals. My life is much simpler now without dealing with a hoarder situation, dealing with one tenant beating up another tenant, one tenant slashing the other tenant's tires. When you have people living in close proximity to each other for years, things can boil and brew for beyond my control.
So is that sort of informing what you're saying about feeling that this is the federal government somehow getting involved in trying to use yourself and other short-term rental owners to fix the housing problems by encouraging you to get into longer-term renters?
They are encouraging that, but they're encouraging it with a strong arm approach. In Australia, I forget which city, they incentivize short-term rental owners to convert to long-term by choice with, I think it's a $10,000 incentive. I think it's $5,000 to convert and $5,000 a year after you have converted. So that makes it optional. I don't feel comfortable with the government telling me what I can and can't do with my own assets. I think that's a slippery slope. Does that not scare everyone when all of a sudden the regulators tell you that your hard-earned assets are now under their control and you do as they say? That scares me on many different levels.
How do you feel about Airbnb operators who have given, for lack of a better term, the industry a bad name? So we had someone call this morning that said that they live by an Airbnb in Winnipeg and it's grandfathered in, so it's allowed to stay. But they've had police there like every 2 weeks. And we've had calls like that from many neighborhoods. So we know there are some issues that are legitimate. What's your sense of how to get around that so that operators who are operating in good faith, aren't affected by that?
Well, I'm sure these rules, if you're not in compliance, and the new rules that have been brought forward or that will be voted on tomorrow by the City of Winnipeg will clean that up in about a week or two. In every industry, there's the downside. You have restaurants with cockroaches in the kitchen, and you have hair salons who aren't sterilizing aren't cleaning their things between clients or dentists, they're not cleaning their equipment properly. I mean, every industry has their loser section. And I'm pretty sure that the rules that came forward in Winnipeg have a way of dealing with that very quickly. My neighbors have all written letters of support for my business into City Council because they like how the properties are maintained. I'm graded on that a couple times a week. I didn't have to make sure there wasn't a blade of grass out of place when I had long-term rentals. So this is, my neighbors are fascinated meeting people from Australia, Japan. I mean, if it's run properly, there isn't a neighborhood impact. And using housing or the neighborhood impact as an excuse to shut down such a popular and valuable resource is just lip service. Most of my clients many of my clients are from northern Manitoba reserves. They're here for medical stays, shopping. They're here for work. And I made sure that our new premier and our provincial government knew this because that's pretty key.
Melanie Mitchell, please come back. Thank you very much for being here with your perspective. Melanie Mitchell owns 3 Airbnbs in Winnipeg, is president of the Manitoba Association of Short-Term Rental Owners, in studio with us on CBC this morning. You can read the Federal Economic Fiscal Update on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. And of course, and not to be confused here, we've got a whole bunch of spotlight on Airbnbs because tomorrow is when our City Council in Winnipeg is going to be voting on some proposed rules to access federal money to build more infill in Winnipeg. So that will be coming tomorrow. If you want to weigh in, 788-3205, especially if you're an owner. Love to hear from you. It is 2 minutes to 8 o'clock. Heather Wells is in with headlines.
The head of the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada applauds a move by the new Manitoba NDP government to make education about the Holocaust mandatory. Meanwhile, the Manitoba Islamic Association also recently met with the new education minister, finalizing a toolkit to help teachers deal with Islamophobia in schools. You can hear more coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather. In Winnipeg, it is -3 and it's calm. Winds are really staying calm right now as well, but they're going to pick up.
Power.
Things are going to change. I got us a new coach.
Taika Waititi's new film, Next Goal Wins, is about the American Samoan football team's quest to get just one goal. Taika will be here to tell you what he found inspiring about their real-life story and why he thinks film and TV need to change their definition of diversity. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel-Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
It is a big milestone that many people look forward to, the decision to have kids. But lots of young people today say they may put off having children or never have them because the cost of living is so high. I'll tell you more about that coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcy Young. A temporary pause in the fighting is coming to Gaza. News of a break in the regular airstrikes offered a moment of hope for Mustafa Barghouti. He is with the Palestinian National Initiative.
All in all, I think this is a beginning of something that could lead to a complete and total ceasefire, the end of this terrible war.
A spokesperson for Israel's prime minister says that will not happen. He says a ceasefire is not possible until Hamas is destroyed. But today is a day of relief for some Israeli families as well. 50 hostages will be released as part of the deal between Israel and Hamas. That deal was reached late last night. Abby Kodasan brings us the latest.
For 46 days, Yossi Schneider's family has been waiting for word about 4 relatives taken hostage by Hamas.
We don't know what their situation, if they're alive, if they're injured, if they're okay mentally.
He says a hostage deal is a ray of hope, but it still feels bleak.
We don't know if my family is on the list or not.
There are 50 people, Israeli women and children, set to be released over 4 days, most likely starting Thursday. This agreement calls for them to be exchanged for 150 Palestinians in Israeli jails. A Palestinian prisoners' rights group says there are about 7,000 political prisoners in Israel. In the West Bank, Fida Abu Maria says her teenage son is one of them. She hopes he will be among those freed, saying her feelings are that of any mother.
So we're holding our noses and we're doing what we have to do.
Eylon Levy is a spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
We're not talking about a ceasefire, we're talking about a temporary cessation in order to get our hostages out.
The Israeli government says the war will continue despite any pause in its...
Hey, Abby, are you recording? Tell me when you're recording again. We're just going to add some things because we were pushing news there, yeah. So just to be clear, how
provinces, it's nowhere near that amount.
Largest number of aging people in the country.
Forever and ever, my heart will be true.
The cost of living doesn't have 77-year-old Doreen Noseworthy singing for joy. A teacher for 37 years, and her husband, an accountant, retired in 2002.
Our pension dollar is still worth what the dollar was worth 20 years ago. People don't realize that because you're retired from teaching or you're a fat cat.
But the buying power of their pensions has shrunk. The nearest supermarket is 50 kilometers away in St. John's. Gas is expensive and food prices soaring.
It's almost tripled the cost of the heating fuel.
How did I get here? Keeps being the question that, we hear.
A recent report from the seniors advocate, Susan Walsh, found that 1 in 3 seniors in this province can't afford basic needs, housing, food, and heating.
They're proud people. They worked their entire lives. They raised their families. They did all the right things.
Maintenance costs have become unaffordable. A new roof will cost Noseworthy $15,000, so their plan is to sell their home and move to a senior's apartment.
It's more than a house, but it is what it is.
Even though their golden years have been tarnished, Noseworthy intends to leave on a positive note. Chris O'Neill-Yates, CBC News, Holyrood, Newfoundland.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcy Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Markusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. After a beautiful sky last night, we are partly cloudy this morning. Sitting at -4 downtown. Thanks for joining us. This half hour on the program, we have a lot to talk about. If you were with us before the news, we were hearing from someone who owns Airbnbs in Winnipeg, 3 of them in fact, with some reaction to Ottawa and the fiscal update yesterday, as in the fiscal update, federally they're vowing to crack down on short-term rentals. So her perspective started to be shared before the news, but after World Report came on, we continued to talk, and we're going to let you hear exactly what that conversation was like as Melanie Mitchell, who's also the Manitoba Association of Short-Term Rental Owners president, weighed in on what this really will mean for her life and her livelihood. So we'll have more on that story. And a lot of talk about infill, just as an aside here, because tomorrow we've also got that vote coming at City Council. So housing, top of mind here. We'll continue. Also this half hour, I just want to mention briefly, a local business owner is going to weigh in. He says the city's move to ban hookah lounges will kill the culture within his community. So stay tuned. That's coming up as well. Right now to Heather Wells with other news headlines.
Good morning. Well, the closure of the Arlington Bridge has revived calls from North End City councillors for a fair share of major infrastructure projects. The city closed the bridge yesterday, and it may not open again. An engineering study found too much corrosion in the bridge that first opened in 1912. A shortage of transit drivers could be the biggest roadblock to Winnipeg's hopes for a better transit system. That's according to the city's transit union. It says 44% of its membership will be eligible for retirement within the next 5 years. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's happening in traffic and weather with Pat Kanuga.
Well, it's just clouded over in the downtown. I've been watching satellite imagery for the last couple of hours here, and it was pretty clear in southern Manitoba, and now clouds are socked in there. We do expect to see a mix of sun and cloud today. We'll get to a 0 from the -4 that we're at right now. Some wind's going to be picking up in a little while. It'll be gusting to 50 near noon from the north. With that 0, could feel a bit of wind chill with that wind as well. We're looking at a -14 wind chill this afternoon with that wind. Clear tonight, down to -13 tomorrow. -9, the coldest day of the week for a daytime high. Will be sunny though, clear and cold tomorrow. And then Thursday into Friday, we dip down to a -15. That's the coldest overnight temperature we've had in a while. Friday, -5. Into your weekend, minus single digits continue, a -2 and a -4. We are also -4 in Brandon this hour. In Brandon, you're going to see a high of -1 today. Wind gusts to 50 this morning as well from the north. And Thompson, you're at chilly -18. You're only going to warm up 4 degrees to a -14. And we're looking at -1s and 0s in much of southern Manitoba today. But again, those winds could make it feel a little bit cooler out there, but clear and cold for the next several days here. In traffic, it's been pretty uneventful besides the Arlington Bridge. 788-3093 is the traffic line to reach me if there's anything to let us know about. And we've been asking you for your listener lines and comments on the Arlington Bridge. We're going to try and get to at least one or two later on in this half hour. But once again, that listener line is 788-309. No, traffic line's 3093. The listener line is 788-3205.
Well, as you likely know and have been hearing analysis of for the last day, the federal Liberals yesterday afternoon tabled their fall fiscal update. A crackdown on short-term rentals like Airbnbs was part of that update. Melanie Mitchell owns 3 Airbnbs here in Winnipeg. She's also president of the Manitoba Association of Short-Term Rental Owners, and she's upset. Full disclosure here, this is live radio, so sometimes, we finish a conversation and then there's just more to talk about. My point of view, there's always more to talk about. But Melanie and I continued our conversation during World Report. And this is the second part of what we discussed. So just to be clear, how will the federal rules affect you or impact you? What are you worried about when we look at the fiscal update, but also from the federal level?
I am worried about when Krista Freeland and Sean Fraser say, we're going to take down these short-term rentals and we're going to make them into housing units. Basically what they're saying is they're going to rip my livelihood right out from under me and everyone I know. And that's not going to solve the affordable housing crisis. There's only 0.37% of all the houses in Winnipeg used for short-term rentals. And in many cities, there's less than 1% like that. And all it is an illusion.
You were talking about a cost discrepancy if you had owned an Airbnb, owning one here versus owning one in Calgary.
Oh, I was talking about the licensing fees in Winnipeg that are proposed in Winnipeg. They're staggering. In Calgary and Regina, to license my 3 short-term rentals would have cost me somewhere in the $700 to $900 range per year. Here in Winnipeg, it's going to cost me $2,600. I can't even get my head around that kind of figure for a license. In other provinces, it's nowhere near that amount. Winnipeg's going to be among one of the highest licensing fees in the country, short of Toronto and Vancouver.
What are you hearing from your members?
The members are panicking. I get people calling me at all hours of the day and night crying because they've got everything they have into this industry. A lot of them, one of our members is a policeman with PTSD. He can't work a regular job, but he can manage a few short-term rentals because it's very sporadic part-time work. My own spouse is injured and he can only do a bit of work each day, so I have him managing my short-term rentals. I put everything I had into this. I bet on myself and won. And now, how dare the government come and take what I've worked for since I was 19 years old. I've worked 60 to 70-hour weeks consistently. I haven't had time off for vacations or things like that. I put everything I had into it. How dare someone come and tell me what I can do with my own asset just because they have mismanaged housing for so long. And now they're going to take less than half of 1% of Winnipeg houses and stomp them out. Krista Freeland said, we want to keep Canadians in their homes. What about my home? What about keeping me in my home? What about all the people I know?
We are expecting to have an interview with the National Minister of Housing, Sean Fraser, the Federal Minister of Housing, Sean Fraser, this week. What would you say to him? What would you ask him?
I would love to ask him why such a small percentage of short-term rentals have become under the microscope as a solution to the housing crisis. The housing crisis is huge, and the short-term rentals are a grain of sand. So why put so much focus on my industry when it's so highly sought after? And I want to ask him, where do you plan to put newcomers to Canada who don't know what neighborhood they want to live in? They arrive with no belongings. Do you want to put them in a hotel for months with 2 kids and maybe a dog or something? Do you want to? Why can't they get a soft landing in a place with blankets, towels, pots and pans? What about insurance claim victims? That's a huge part of our business. What about them who are out of their homes with their entire family for 4 months? That's the typical major insurance claim on a house. I had a family that had 2 teenagers and 2 little kids and a dog. Where were they supposed to go for 4 months? As well in Winnipeg, they're saying you can't rent for over 30 days. So that family would be displaced 4 times over 4 months. But that's a local issue. Federally, I am wondering why no one has called out the federal government or on how this is not going to have any effect on affordable housing. If you browse through Winnipeg's Airbnb listings, and I have, and many people have, you don't see one that rents even long-term unfurnished for less than, say, $1,500 to $1,800 a month and higher.
In comparison to the other costs.
Yes. So I did an equation on affordable housing using $15.30 an hour and a 40-hour week. I calculated CMHC's recommendation on what someone in that position could spend on housing. It's about $700 a month. There's not a single unit in Winnipeg that would rent for $700 a month, furnished or unfurnished. So they could be all stomped out tomorrow, and it won't help affordable housing one iota. And I have an assumption that federally it's the same deal.
That's Melanie Mitchell. She owns 3 Airbnbs in Winnipeg and is president of the Manitoba Association of Short-Term Rental Owners. Our conversation was prompted by the Federal Economic Fiscal Update. You can read more on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. And as mentioned, we hope in the coming days we will have an interview with the federal housing minister. In addition, if you want to weigh in whether you've owned an Airbnb, whether you've stayed in an Airbnb and why, and what your thoughts are on how they fit into our communities in Manitoba, 788-3205.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you. Liftoff. Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1 and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
8:21 is the time right now, and -4 is the temperature in Winnipeg. Tuduli Lake's at -19. That's the cold spot in the province this morning. Well, let's return to a story that we were reporting on earlier in the week. The City of Winnipeg is drafting a bylaw right now to ban hookah lounges in Winnipeg. City Council's Community Services Committee voted unanimously on last Monday, to draft the bylaw banning water pipes inside businesses and patios. Committee Chair Evan Duncan tabled the motion, which now heads to the Executive Policy Committee and then to City Council next month. But the proposal is a concern for hookah lounge owners like Ali Zeid. He's the co-owner of Habibi's Cafe in Winnipeg. CBC's Jim Agapito had a chance to speak with him about what this proposed ban would mean for him.
As long as I really could remember, I've been seeing my uncles and grandfather smoking hookah from past times, from years, since I was a little kid. Hookah has been around for years and years and years, and it's I'm from the Middle East. Hookah is a huge part of our culture, from socializing to gathering to just friends, solo, studying, having a hookah, enjoying that relaxation. It goes beyond just having a hookah, or what we would say argile. Hookah, it can be herbal molasses, and it goes a variety of flavors. You can have your original flavors from double apple to lemon mint to orange mint, watermelon, grape. You can do your own mixes. You put your herbal tobacco in the hookah here, so you have your clay head, and then you have your 2 coals on the top. add your tobacco inside with your tin foil, and you have your water pipe that, of course, when you start to smoke. Here at Habibi's Cafe, we always try to keep it as clean as possible. And we always want to make sure that you have the best experience possible. So when you come in, you get a fresh hose, which means the hose after each use is thrown out. And we also give you a melt tip. So this is the melt tip that goes in. So in case you're sharing, you pull out your melt tip, give it to your buddy. And your buddy will have his own melt tip, and they will smoke out of that as well. So every hookah gets a new hose, fresh clean water with a fresh clean tray. Friday nights we have older crowd to your younger crowd. Now, of course, when you go young, we don't go under 18. We always like to keep it over 18 because, you know, there is smoke. Just like when you go buy cigarettes or when you want to buy a vape, you have to be that age. They come in alone. They order their double apple. They like to sit down, reflect on their week. You know, they could have a stressful day. They come in, they unwind with a nice hookah. Just like how people would go on a stressful week, they go unwind with a drink. Some people don't drink, so they unwind with a beautiful hookah, and they unwind with a beautiful tea or a coffee. You know, it's something totally different than going to have a cigarette or going to go drink and get drunk or possibly going to go smoke marijuana. You know, they don't do that. They come here, you know, it's safe, it's calm. There's no loudness, nice Arabic music or whatever preference music you want to play. They're enjoying themselves. They really feel home. We are the opposite of a bar. We here we don't have alcohol.
In terms of, like, you know, ventilation, I mean, what is that like? What's that like in here?
We have a ventilation system that sucks up all the smoke, and we also have a HVAC system that brings in air. Us sitting here right now, I'm smoking a hookah. We have our people sitting beside us smoking hookah. They're all over it. I don't feel a single drop of smoke around me. You don't feel like you're dying of smoke at all.
City Council is drafting a bylaw to try and ban hookah in lounges and on patios. You know, what would that mean for your business?
It hits both ways for businesses and for our customers. The business is not just losing, sales off a hookah, but you're also losing that employee that was working hookah, or the servers that served hookah, or the university students that are in school working part-time. Their hours are going to be cut because now we don't have the product anymore. But on top of that, you're also losing that environment that's safe and, you know, friendly, and you're pushing them away to something different, which could not be friendly or safe, or can be a relaxation. They could be looking at other things. I wish that everyone could just come in and understand and see the vibe in here. It may not be for everybody, just like marijuana may not be for everybody. Everyone doesn't agree with it, but it's still there. Sometimes it's kind of feel like they're picking and choosing what they want to ban.
If it goes through, well, what will you do as a business?
God knows. You really don't know. We're a restaurant as well. We have food, and with cutting hookah, you know, you're cutting a safe zone for everyone trying to enjoy a nice, relaxing evening. Where are they going to go? Could that affect our whole business? It could. It could affect our whole business. It could affect people coming in and, you know, maybe not wanting to eat anymore because our hookahs are gone. It could. Just to say we want to cut hookah and ban it, you have to understand what you're banning. It's not just hookah. You're banning. You're trying to ban the culture.
What message would you send then to City Council?
I really think that they need to sit and understand what they're really cutting. They're cutting the culture, and as a Canadian, you can't cut culture. This is what we do. And not saying we as in me, I'm saying people that enjoy hookah, argile, this is what they love to do. I don't think anyone in this world would understand or would allow that to be culture.
If it does happen, what will you do? What would that mean?
You know, it's crazy you asked me that, because I don't know what we would do. I really don't know what I would do. We'd have to go and we'd fight for it not to be banned, of course, right? And our customers, of course, would be right behind us, but what would you do?
CBC's Jim Agapito speaking to Habibi's Cafe co-owner Ali Zeid about hookah lounges in Winnipeg. The City of Winnipeg drafting a bylaw to ban the lounges in Winnipeg. And this will also affect, by the way, cigar lounges. We still have those in the city as well. This will head to Executive Policy Committee. Council will vote on this next month, and you can always weigh in. We've had lots of people weighing in on all the stories, lots of engagement, things that affect your life. And one of the big things is Arlington Bridge. Pat?
A couple of interesting questions here from a couple of listeners here, and I'm going to play these right now. And these are calls to our listener line at 788-3205.
Good morning. My name is Nick Donaldson. I'm calling regarding the Arlington Bridge. When I was young, that bridge was old. Not so young now. And we have been talking about this over and over and over again. The rail yards have been talked about moving over and over and over again. And now, finally, we have reached a 0 hour for this bridge. If I could use another analogy, the North End needs a knee replacement, and the Arlington Bridge is the knee. I think it's time to replace it with something else, and we're going to run into this problem again with the Harry Lazarenko Bridge and the Louise Bridge. We have aging infrastructure, and we need to better manage this before we run into these problems again. Anyhow, that is my comment regarding the Arlington Bridge. Have a good day.
Al Doty, I'm curious about the Arlington overpass. Would it maybe be cheaper to get rid of the rail yards and just put a straight road through that would never have to be rebuilt to the tunes of hundreds of millions? That's all. Thanks.
Well, Al, since you asked, I just looked up some details on that. Our Bartley Kivas did an analysis piece on our website back in April of this year, and I'll just read you a little bit of it to answer your question. There are many barriers to rail relocation. Dismantling existing rail lines, rail yards, and outbuildings and rebuilding them elsewhere could cost billions of dollars, especially when you consider the need to build new rail overpasses outside the city. Such an effort would also require the cooperation of the municipal, provincial, and federal governments, as well as major railways. The latter are not eager to entertain the idea, Bartley Kivas writes. So I hope that answers your question a little bit, Al. So thank you for the calls.
It's interesting to see how the city's going to choose to spend the money. Ian Walker wrote in, I'm not perpetuating a north-south conversation, but that's exactly what's happening. Naturally. Ian wrote, the city should focus its limited infrastructure money on replacing the bridge instead of building the Chief Peguis extension. We can't afford new roads. So that's not north-south. Chief Peguis is, of course, still north. But now we're going to have competing infrastructure dollars all over the city. And as you heard Ross Eady earlier this morning talking about Bartley Kivas, there has always been that concern that more money gets spent south than north. So can we quantify that? I'm not going there. But Arlington Bridge, what will we do? 788-3205. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's partly cloudy, -4 right now. The wind has switched directions now northeast, and that's going to see us rise to 0 today, but then cool down quite a lot overnight tonight. We are learning more about the Israel-Hamas deal. The first Israeli hostages are expected to be freed tomorrow morning. In exchange, Israel will start releasing some Palestinian prisoners. There will be a pause in the fighting as part of this deal, and hundreds of aid trucks will be allowed into Gaza. Advocates praise here at home the new NDP government for its decision to make education about the Holocaust mandatory in public schools. Belle Jarneski at the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada says people have been lobbying the government for decades. She met with the new education minister 10 days ago to explain why teaching about the Holocaust is so important.
When students learn about the Holocaust, they engage with very complicated moral questions, some that do not come with simple answers, and critical thinking is also a big part of this.
Jarneski recommends the province make Holocaust education part of the grade 11 Canadian history curriculum. Now, the province will also make more resources available to teachers to deal with Islamophobia in schools. The Manitoba Islamic Association is putting the final touches on a new toolkit for teachers. Tasneem Valley is with the group.
This is a very important toolkit to educate educators so that when they are addressing children in their classroom or in a different setting, to know where they're coming from, to understand that there might be a background to something a child is saying and to understand context.
Valley says it is critical to provide extra supports now as many Winnipeggers are directly affected by the conflict in Gaza. If you normally take the Arlington Bridge on your morning commute, as you've been hearing, you're going to have to get used to another route. The Arlington Bridge was closed yesterday after an engineering study found too much corrosion in the bridge that first opened in 1912. Its closure is reviving calls from North End City councillors for a fair share of major infrastructure projects. The city had a plan to replace Arlington Bridge 5 years ago, but that project came with a price tag of $330 million. Menarski councillor Ross Eady doesn't think the Arlington Bridge is a priority for Mayor Scott Gillingham.
The mayor
chooses and wants to ignore it because he wants his widening of Kenaston, right? So this is always the competing interest.
Vivian Santos, the city councillor for Point Douglas, hopes the other two levels of government will now agree to pay for a new bridge. Charges have been stayed against a man accused of being involved in a homicide at Winnipeg's Manwin Hotel. Evan Douglas Ballantyne was charged earlier this year with manslaughter in the death of 40-year-old Carl George Westcoop. Westcoop's body was found in a suite at the Main Street Hotel in January. The Crown stayed the charges against Ballantyne earlier this month. A spokesperson says prosecutors determined the evidence against Ballantyne did not meet the Crown's charging standard. Charges remain against 5 other men charged in Westcoop's death and the death of 40-year-old Lee James Boulette. His body was found a few blocks away at the same time. Police have said they believe the 2 men's deaths were related. A shortage of Winnipeg transit drivers could be the biggest roadblock to the city's hopes for a better transit system. That's according to the city's transit union. It says 44% of its membership will be eligible for retirement within the next 5 years. Union President Chris Scott says the city needs to do a better job recruiting and retaining transit drivers.
We can redesign the routes all we want, but the service levels needed to serve the demand of the public can't be met without those employees.
The city's Public Works Committee yesterday passed a proposal to set June of 2025 as the rollout day for a new primary transit network. The original target was 2026. The Manitoba government is making birth control free to all Manitobans with a prescription. The announcement came in yesterday's NDP throne speech and an election promise of Premier Wab Kinew. Caitlin Bloxham at Clinic Community Health says there's a real need for affordable and accessible birth control around the province.
Individuals have a right to control over their body and the right to take a medication to prevent a pregnancy if they do not want to have a pregnancy. And that is a right that should be available to everyone, and currently cost is a huge barrier.
The NDP previously pegged the cost to implement the universal coverage of select contraceptives at $11 million a year. BC is the only province currently offering free birth control. Stay in step with the news as it is updated throughout the day. Just head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Thanks to Heather Wells and to Joni Nicolo and Megan Ketchison in our news department. Big thanks to our live crew this morning. Travis Peterson behind the controls of our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Subscribe, check it out. Abby Adeyemi behind the controls of our show here in the morning, and Pat Kanuga, as well as our hardworking team of APs and our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. All right, Pat, what do you want to say?
Well, and a thanks to Mother Nature for the past 2 weeks, because these warm temperatures are pretty much coming to an end. Another 0 today with some wind and some wind chill. Sunshine and cold the next few days. A -9 tomorrow and a -5 on Friday. End of the weekend, -2 and -4, but minus single digits for the next couple of weeks here. So could be worse at this time of year as we get into December, not too far around the corner. So once again, we're -4 right now on the way to that 0. Have a fabulous Wednesday, everyone.
All right. Thanks very much, Pat. Well, take care, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging. So the ongoing discussions about what it's really like to be a transit user in Winnipeg, and also what you see as the future of density in the city and how we should build. Both of those things are going to be ongoing conversations through tomorrow, of course, that vote coming up at Council on Infill. But please give us a call on anything you hear on the show that you want to weigh in on. 788-3205. Take care, be well. The Current coming up next here on CBC. I'm Marcy Markusa.